Good morning, y'all. We are calling to order the Standing Committee on Homelessness at 8:30. The meeting is called to order. We'll have a roll call.
The record shall reflect that the chair and vice chair are present.
All right, addressing the committee to speak on an item on the agenda, fill out the speaker slip and the number you wish to speak on, give it to the clerk staff. If you are on Zoom and you would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. And speakers will have 3 minutes to address the committee. Next, we'll have approval of our minutes. I'm good on the minutes. Any changes, Mayor? All right, and we will, begin with the pledge. Thank you. Please rise. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. No oral communications I see this morning. We're going to move right into our discussion on our encampment resolution funding. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Vice Chair. This item provides an overview of the city's approved encampment resolution funding round 3 or ERF 3 grant program. On November 27th, 2023, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness announced the availability of $400 million in ERF 3 program funds. And on June 25th, 2024, the City Council approved an application with a total cost of $7,800,942.09. On December 23rd, 2024, the city received a notice of award for its proposal, but with public notice of the award embargoed pending HCD's own public announcement. The City of Vista's proposal scored the second highest number of points of all 57 awarded ERF 3 proposals. On February 11th, 2025, the City Council authorized the City Manager to sign ERF 3 grant documents, and on February 25th, 2025, the public notice embargo was lifted with HCD's public notice of all awards. Finally, on March 11th, 2025, the City Council accepted and appropriated the city's ERF 3 funds. The identified ERF 3 program area encompasses approximately 10 linear miles in both directions along State Route 78, which contains the Emerald Drive, Melrose Drive, Vista Village Drive, Civic Center Drive, Mar Vista Drive, and Sycamore Avenue on and off ramps to and from the city. The boundaries are notably extended into the city to include the Hacienda BPO, the Vista Downtown District, and the Sycamore Corridor, all with frequent engagements with unsheltered residents. It should be noted that the activities funded with ERF 3 discussed during this presentation are not limited to residents engaged in these boundaries, but rather made available to these clients. The city's approved ERF 3 program includes internal city costs and funds the Homeless Services Program Manager and Management Analyst salaries between January 1st and June 30th, 2027. Both positions are currently funded with a state appropriation from Senator Catherine Blakespear through December 31st, 2026, and will continue to be responsible for implementation of the strategic plan to address homelessness, including the ERF 3 program. The awarded proposal also funds a new housing specialist position at $386,641, originally for 3 years, but is currently anticipated for 2 years between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th, 2027, as a limited term and probationary position. The housing specialist will be responsible for administering rapid rehousing and landlord incentive funds approved with the city's ERF 3 program and discussed later in this presentation. An additional $371,473 is approved for indirect administrative costs borne by the city. Total internal costs funded by ERF 3 equaled $925,053.08. The approved ERF 3 program also continues and expands currently operating strategic plan activities. $388,412 was approved for operating reserves of the BCNC through the life of the program, which ends December 31st, 2026. $1,121,132 was approved to continue the Vista Safe Parking Program between June 25th, 2025.
Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt, but when you say operating reserves, explain what that is.
Contingency costs, anything that comes up that was not originally budgeted for, such as repairs or anything like that.
So do we have a list of deductions from that operating reserve?
We haven't spent any yet.
Okay, so we'll expect to be able to roll whatever unspent amount into future programs.
Say that one more time.
We'll expect to be able to roll any unspent amount into future programs.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could add, we do expect those funds to expire, so maybe we can get feedback from staff when we're getting close to those funds expiring, so that we can then change it over into another program.
Yeah, that's correct. So as far as rolling it forward, if it's unspent, there is a spend deadline at the end of fiscal year 27. So if there's anything unspent before, then we want to reappropriate those ahead of time.
And I would probably want to have at least a year to, we're going to have to come before us, develop program, or, roll it over into specific program. We could have the program established already, but you're right, Mayor, those funds may be available if we don't have any need for the reserve.
Yeah, maybe we should just add it to the calendar now for a year from now to
I think that's.
Yeah, in fact,
at least dramatically reduce the reserve, because in the last year, the chances of needing such a significant reserve probably a lot less.
yeah, it's absolutely possible. Okay, $1,121,132 was approved to continue the Vista Safe Parking Program between June 25th, 2025 and June 30th, 2027.
Jonathan, when are we going to hear from JFS again on status and updates on safe parking?
There's going to be some updates today from staff, but we can certainly invite them to come provide that update in person at the next meeting.
I mean, what is our regular schedule to have JFS present on this? I mean, it should be at least every 6 months.
Yeah, it's at the bi-monthly workshops.
At your workshops? I'm sorry, who meets at these workshops? What
It's the
workshops
city
are we
council
having?
workshops, the twice-a-year workshops.
Oh, you said bi-monthly. You
I'm
said
sorry,
twice annually.
biannually. I apologize.
Okay. I'd like to have them come here in front of us in this format where we can get into it a little bit more.
Sure.
Yeah, let's bring them up before our next workshop.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to preview. That would be actually really good to preview
Contracts.
all of our reports from vendors in this. We're going to have like 3 different things going on now. So this is still our standing committee. So we'll say preview it in the standing committee before it comes to the full council.
When's the next workshop scheduled?
Next workshop is scheduled in September, but the JFS contract is, as you'll see, is going to be renewed at the June 24th city council meeting. I can make sure JFS is here to present it to the standing committee meeting ahead of that.
Well,
So we would say the next
let's
month.
have them next month if they're available.
Yeah,
it's
next
been a
year,
long time.
next month in April.
That'd be good. It's been a long time since we've heard from them.
Yeah, agreed.
Sorry.
No problem. Continuing, a total of $2,671,345 was approved for operating costs of a homelessness outreach program, which was solicited for with a request for proposals published at the same time the ERF3 application was prepared. The ERF3 outreach RFP received 5 proposals, with San Diego Rescue Mission, or SDRM, receiving the highest score. Award of the ERF3 outreach contract is contingent on a successful 4-month review of SDRM's current agreement for citywide outreach services, the March 25th, 2025 City Council meeting. Total operating costs for strategic plan activities approved with the ERF3 funds are $4,180,889.01. Housing and client assistance funds were also approved with the city's ERF3 proposal, including landlord incentives for housing providers at $200 per household experiencing homelessness rented to, with 150 of these households budgeted for. An additional $50,000 was included for incidental damages caused by households housed in the ERF3 program, for a total of $80,000 in landlord engagement and incentive costs. $100,000 was included for outreach client flex funds to be included with the ERF3 outreach contract. $20,000 of rapid rehousing assistance was approved for 125 households, for a total of $2.5 million in rapid rehousing assistance funds. And $400 per household was approved for 25 households for family reunification costs. While the case management of all ERF3 program clients will be performed by the ERF3 contracted outreach provider, the internal housing specialist will be responsible for reviewing and administering the funding requests. An additional $5,000 was approved for a workforce development and education program for a total cost of housing and client assistance funds approved for $2,695,000.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Jonathan, go back.
Sure.
Okay, 200 per household rented, so that goes to the landlord?
Correct.
So you're gonna give them a $200 incentive to rent an apartment to somebody who's recovering from chronic homelessness?
Correct. Or episodic homelessness.
Who's that gonna incentivize?
The landlord, the housing provider.
What landlord would be incentivized by $200?
My landlord.
Yeah.
My landlord would, yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not trying to be disagreeable,
No,
but
no, no, I
absolutely
don't
no
mean
one.
to be abrupt. I
No, I just-
genuinely, my landlord would be incentivized
Well,
by
I mean, who
$200.
doesn't want a free $200? But let me tell you, there is no one, not one person on this earth who owns property who is going to be incentivized to make different decisions for the use of their property or who they're going to rent it to for the amount of $200. I mean, it's just not going to happen. Period. There's not one human being who owns property who would make a differential decision about renting in regard to somebody's credit worthiness. $200 doesn't come close to ameliorating risk. So,
Totally depends on the status of some of their other criteria, right?
well, my
Hear
concern
that, for sure.
is that the money is given, it won't, we hope there will be people, we hope all people who are suffering homelessness get housed, but $200 is not going to change anyone's calculus. Therefore, I would think that you, citing maybe 51% of the time with, not with the landlord, I love landlords, but why am I handing out $200 a piece goodie to people that's not going to change their thinking one
I'm not
iota?
taking any sides, Mayor, but the question is, will $200 suffice as an incentive? I don't think as a loan it suffices as an incentive, and what I was hoping we could do is talk about what this housing assistance program is going to look like, because in my opinion, we have to have benchmarks. We need to say, how many are we actually going to bring into this program? Otherwise, this position is being wasted. So,
When you
and
say position, are you talking about a staff member?
I'm talking about this, yeah, this grant-funded staff member position.
Oh.
We need to know what their outcomes are going to look like, right? You and I can say and hypothesize that $200 is not going to.
No, it's not a hypothesis. I mean, it's an absolute fact with no arguability.
Does this program exist anywhere else? And are landlords ever incentivized with a $200 inclusion?
This is based on a currently operating landlord engagement program in the city of San Diego.
Well, this is stupid. To say it's stupid is a grand understatement. It's asinine, is what it is.
That's an idea.
I mean, nobody what's rent going for on a one-bedroom apartment right now?
FMR is about $1,800.
$1,800. Isn't that $36,000 a year?
Sounds about right.
Who's taking a $36,000 credit risk decision and being incentivized differently over $200? I mean, I know you know that doesn't make sense. That absolutely would not incentivize anybody. So we're just handing it to people for what?
Jonathan, why don't you tell us about the program and why you included this in the grant?
Yeah, so this is based again on
I have
existing.
don't
other
understand.
criticisms of the program. I have other criticisms of the program. But I do want to hear why it was included in the grant.
This
We
is
got
just-
we got the funding for it.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So this is based on the existing program in the city of San Diego. Landlord incentives is a
It's a
common.
horrible idea.
We're open to council or the committee's feedback on this idea. These are the approved use of these funds, but certainly I think we're able to make modifications at the committee's discretion.
Let's be clear, the ERF grant was provided and awarded based on the criteria that we gave them. We can, pending direction from council, ask HUD to change some of these criteria or move some of this money around to other eligible uses.
Why would the state
just
of
have to go back through
California?
them.
I mean, I like landlords. Please, landlords listening, do not misunderstand. But it's anathema to me why we would if I'm renting you an apartment that rents for $36,000 for the year for one bedroom, I mean, $200 is literally a non-factor.
Well, this is where we get to come together, Mayor, and talk about what the program will accomplish, because if we are shooting ourselves in the foot and giving out $200 incentives that are not going to stick for a negligent tenant, we can talk about the criteria of what someone in the Boyne Creek Navigation Center has to do in order to apply for these funds. These are not going to be funds that are eligible for everyone. If you are not housing ready, if you don't have, good credit or a rental history that hasn't been resolved, or if you have debts, or if you're not going to be a reliable tenant, if you don't have a job, you shouldn't be getting these program funds, right? We want to be able to give these funds to people who are going to be successful in their housing. And what the $200 in my mind, and from my understanding of the programs, what it helps overcome is this potential stigma of someone coming in from a program and receiving rental assistance. Because landlords are not technically legally allowed to discriminate based on source of income alone, and a rental assistance program is considered a source of income. But there is still maybe a discouragement about that, right? That this is not going to be a reliable tenant. But if the tenant is housing ready, right, and they don't have some of the problems you're describing, then $200 could be a big incentive for that person. So we can talk about what the program requirements are, right, and what we expect this housing coordinator to do. But that's my feedback on this, is that I would like to have a little bit of oversight into what the program accomplishes, what the criteria is, and how this housing staff person is going to be accomplishing benchmarks.
I would just say that all of the people who own rental housing, all of them are wealthy people. Not some of them, not most of them, but all of them, by virtue of the fact that they have the ability to own rental housing, makes them wealthy, in my personal opinion. And, given inflation, $200 is just not what it used to be. Not only is it an insignificant proportion of $18,000 for the year, or $36,000 for the year, I mean, but it's just not enough to take any kind of a risk or to be incentivized. So therefore, we're going to give it to people, and I just think it's money up in smoke. And I think the taxpayers are looking and asking what's happened with our money. I just don't know that it is actually going to change anybody's thinking. And if you would indulge me just momentarily, if I could ask Pete, who I love dearly, but is, I would love to hear your opinion on this, but
Please, Pete. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
give us a brief thought on this, is what we're talking about, Pete, is landlords being willing to take somebody out of retread. We're going to give them a $200 incentive to do so. But my contention is that nobody is going to be moved by $200 to accept a tenant that they weren't already going to take.
And I will, just for information purposes, the $200, if it is awarded to the landlord, right, as an incentive, then that tenant is secure with a lease. Is that, to my understanding, is that what we should expect? That
The incentive will
$200,
be paid
it might seem wasteful, right? But if somebody's willing to accept that $200, what we get in return is a lease agreement.
But my question specifically is, is there somebody that you think would choose one of your program participants instead of another equally creditworthy person based on a $200? I mean, I guess $200 if I have two people of equal credit worthiness, but
Yeah.
I don't know that our people coming out of retread are going to ever be in the eyes of, they're probably not going to be facing equal. If this was a $2,000 incentive, it would make so much more sense to me.
Of course.
The
more money, the better.
Well, I don't know that it's even necessary to provide an incentive at all. My concern is the incentive is so de minimis as to not change anyone's behavior and to therefore be a complete evaporation of taxpayer dollars.
I think that it depends on if the client is housing ready or not, right? Is this a client that's coming directly out of homelessness, directly out of an encampment, that's still active in an addiction, et cetera, and the landlord's able to see that and witness that or feel that,
Yeah.
But if it's coming out of like the Buena Creek Navigation Center and they've already lived in shared housing with us and we kind of see them, I know where their finances are. I feel like they worked on a budget plan. They worked with their case manager with us, and a lot of our clients, they have a vehicle, they have a job. And so I feel like this would probably benefit more so the ones that are like housing ready, like you're saying.
Here-
And sometimes I think that would with the landlord, just in the ones that, it could incentivize them a little bit.
really-
They're already housing ready and it's like,
Really
hey,
specifically, though, have you ever worked with a landlord that didn't want to take somebody that you thought just $200 would change their calculus? I mean,
I'm not sure really, but
I'm
Have
just
you
saying,
ever had funds available to assist with that?
yeah, so back in the day with the San Diego Housing Commission, it's like down in San Diego, they used to have the landlord incentive. It's called the LEAP program. So that's probably where Daniel kind of got a little bit of this.
How
is
much
the
was that
LEAP
amount?
Program was landlord engagement assistance program. You'd have a housing navigator that could incentivize landlords by giving them, but it was giving them 2 times the security deposit.
which is substantially more
So it'd be
money.
like if the rent was
$3,600.
$1,200 a month, they could potentially offer the landlord.
In addition to the $200, we also have the actual rental assistance funds, right? And rent.
That's what I was gonna get to was, yeah, it's the 200 for the landlord, but you're also, the way that I pitch it to a landlord is like, hey, you're not getting somebody that's just completely on their own. They also have a little bit of financial assistance. You have a third-party organization that is secure, that is stable,
secure
that
enough to
is
give
whatever.
$200 and,
That
a
$200,
mug.
but if they're also getting some of that rapid rehousing money, then they're also getting per se secure payment for a while, if that makes sense, because it's not,
but
they're
maybe
not only getting the
$200 isn't
$200,
enough,
they're getting
Mayor.
also the support.
I agree, maybe it's a kind of insulting
Well, and I see
incentive.
it's being added to this rapid rehousing of $20,000 per household. I mean, if you're giving somebody $20,000 to secure their housing, now that starts to seem like a pretty significant incentive for me as a landlord. Okay, I know this person can pay the first $20,000 rent. And where are we coming up with $20,000? That is so much money. Why does it, I mean, I don't think you can solve anybody's problem for $20,000. If you can't solve it for $7,000, I don't think you can solve it. I mean, you're creating a situation, if you invest $20,000 where you've got somebody who has a structural financial personal deficit, they're not able to afford their rent. When that $20,000 runs out in less than a year, they're homeless again.
So Mayor, would you
I
recommend
don't
taking this back to the full council and revising our grant and asking the state of California to change the $2.5 million that we received for rental assistance and the $50,000, how much total? $80,000 for landlord incentives. Should we go back to I would not recommend that.
Well, here's what I'm saying. I really don't understand the $200 thing, and somebody can try and explain that to me further. It doesn't make any sense to me. Rapid rehousing, $20,000 per household. The problem is MAC wound up giving out $10,000 per household. So what we saw in actual program administration is we saw people go whoop right to the ceiling. So what that said to me is the ceiling needs to be a lot lower because I want to serve a lot more people. And what do we talk about as the barrier? I would say, now it's been a while since I rented an apartment, so somebody help me out who's rented more recently than I have. Is it generally, every time, and I've rented 5 or more apartments in my life, generally I paid a security deposit equal to 1 month rent, and then I had to pay the first month's rent. I know sometimes you have to pay first and last. Well, but that's basically what it is. It's 2 months rent to get into an apartment, right? And so then maybe I could see us giving people $3,600 first and last, make it $5,000. That covers the first month and the deposit and $1,000 for moving expenses.
What was your number?
I would say 5,000.
Okay, here's where I disagree. So average rent in Vista is $2,200. For a rent stabilizing program like this, right, where you're getting someone into housing and you're transitioning them, I think that it should be available to transition someone for 6 months to stabilize them. That's a $13,000 ceiling, right, if you just take that average rent. So I think if you want to lower that ceiling, I don't have a problem with it, but I think it should be reflective of a program goal. And I think 6-month stabilization is appropriate
Well,
for
let me,
transitioning them out of the shelter and into, and hopefully they're housing ready already, right? But for 6 months, they can be saving and stabilizing themselves.
I want to really talk this through with you. What happens in 6 months if they can't afford the apartment without these funds?
They have a job while they have a job, but that's part of the housing ready, right, idea, is that they have a job. And, sometimes the entry-level work isn't what you would hope, right, in terms of someone's income. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of these, local jobs that are paying, entry-level incomes and that our folks in the Boyne Creek Navigation Center are going to be accessing, right, their employment might not be able to, really cover rent. Yeah, I think you're onto something here, Mayor, because the cost of housing is way too much for the average working person's income. So for anyone, whether it's someone coming out of our program or just like a random person on the street, their income is very challenged by their cost of living and their rent, right? But if they're in our programs, then they have access to education, services, employment, career development, right? So I think that the post-exit rehabilitative services, and this is where we have to kind of build these programs, but the exiting from our navigation center should include more continued robust services after the 6 months, which should include rental assistance if we really want people to be stabilized long-term. Otherwise, the best way for us to stabilize them is with permanent supportive housing, right, where it's subsidized for long-term because we know that their income potential is not as high. So, we got to kind of make a choice about what we want the programs to look like. And I think, just top of mind, 6-month transition, being able to utilize grant funding like this, if we're going to have housing post-shelter, it's going to be market rate for the most part. So, $200,000, I think that's responding to the market rates right now. And we know that for 6 months, someone could be covered, right? At least. Now, people might reach that ceiling really quickly because, the cost of living is so high. But is there a way for us to step it down? So let's talk about that in the program, right? And I think that maybe some of the concerns that you have are how is it sustainable? We need to develop really solid programs where we're gradually giving people more self-sufficiency opportunities, right? And we're stepping down our support so that we're not just cutting them off and then they're, left with this $2,200 rent that they can't afford. They didn't get any career assistance to improve their income or anything like that, right? So we need this person, this housing position specialist needs to continue to be, working with our other service providers. And do we really include in our grant, post-exit care? Or is it just the rental assistance, right? Is it just the money? I don't think it is, right? We're going to be providing more care. So what do you think about that, Mayor, about how we step down our assistance and try to provide care for people in a block of time as they're transitioning out of the shelter?
If I may add just a little bit more context to promote the discussion. So one error on this slide, and I apologize for, it's $200 per individual, not per household. So you're further incentivized by multiple individuals within a household if you are to house a
You
family.
said the slide is wrong.
Correct, yeah, correct. It's $200 per individual, not household. Now, this entire program is considered in the totality of the entire program. So it's not just funding that we're using to move folks off the street into housing. These will be attached to the housing stabilization case managers that will be included with the outreach program. So the clients that are going to be moved into the housing with these funds will continue and will be required to receive continued housing stabilization case management, much of the way you would see in permanent supportive housing, but this would be considered scattered site permanent supportive housing rather than a single development. We can utilize currently market rate units in that way. So we have $200 per individual housed within the household, $50,000 additional for a security deposit in effect for the entire program. Now, those are the same individuals that receive the $20,000 of rapid rehousing, meaning that includes the security deposit, first and last month rent, and continued rental assistance for the first 6 to 12 months, including moving costs, while they continue to receive case management, develop a budget, and ensure that they can maintain that housing. So this is included to fund the actual services to be provided through case management, not just funds isolated in its own vacuum, if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm still completely unmoved by this $200 amount. It isn't going to incentivize anybody who owns an apartment. Pete, what you Retread bought some housing on the other side of the street, isn't that correct? Green Oaks Ranch Ministry bought some housing on the other side of the street. How many units you buy over there? 13 units. How many people? 13 rooms.
As well as like a house that's
How many
kind of
people
more
in
for
each
staff
room?
housing and stuff. So it depends. They're doing it. It's more acting like a sober living where
Are some of those rooms double occupancy?
some of them are double occupancy.
What does it
some
cost
are single, depended upon.
If I wanted to rent a room that's double occupancy, what would my cost be?
I believe she has it at like 800 a month.
800. If I wanted my own, well, 800. But if it's 2,200 for your own place, right?
Yeah.
$800. I mean,
You sharing a kitchen, bathroom?
Yeah, sharing it all.
It's two people in
yeah,
there?
It's crazy right now.
how many people in the whole apartment unit?
As of right now,
No, I mean, you said 13 apartments, but are they one-bedroom or two-bedroom apartments?
they're not even apartments. It's literally like a shared housing, like sober living environment where there's like 2 kitchens and there's
Well, how many?
rooms.
So are they
Similar to
built out just like?
BCNC,
Let me ask Pete. Are they built out just like BCNC? Are they 6-bedroom apartments?
No, not like that actually.
Well, how many people
It's
share
a
one
little bit
bathroom?
different.
Pete, how many people share a bathroom?
I don't know. I'm not the one over
You
at
don't know,
Green Oaks
okay.
Ranch Ministries.
Well, I'm just.
gotten a few
I'm going to
people
move us
over there,
back
but
to, Mayor,
Well,
the
hold on.
presentation.
Yeah, no,
The
this
housing
is-
market, there's a lot of options available.
Well, but this is extremely relevant because this is the kind of attainable housing that individuals who are transitioning out of the BCNC would be perfect for them to have an $800 a month option, right? Thank you, Pete.
So I have a question for staff. Do we have to go back to the state in order to modify these funds at all? Like if we wanted to say that there's a 6-month period, right? Or that we're providing the assistance in tiers, right? Because I see funding, I don't see programming in front of me. So do we know what the programming is going to look like? Are we beholden to the grant in any way for how that looks?
Yes, so all of the costs identified in the proposal as awarded are limited to those uses. But as far as programming, if you're referring to the actual case management portion, that is included with the program with the ERF3 outreach provider.
So we have kind of a accessible partnership, as the mayor's describing, of potentially a contractor who has additional housing, right? And so some of these funds could go towards, and I wouldn't expect everybody to take advantage of the $200 incentive, but I'm sure Green Oak Ranch, if they had rooms available or beds available in their housing, right, that they're providing, that they might want to take advantage of the $200 incentive. Why not, right? It's there, it's on the table. But, there's different housing costs, right? There's the average $2,200 apartment, and then there's $800 room for rent, shared room, shared bathroom for rent. So one, what do we do if we don't spend $20,000 on that person, right? Does that mean we get to help more people? I want to see that happen,
Absolutely.
right? And then also, hold on one second, how are the funds programmed? Are we able to do it in 6-month blocks, right? Can it be tiered down, right, the assistance?
I was really getting to some good points here. And if you'll indulge me just a moment longer.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Chairwoman. I've lived in some cruddy housing in my life. I've rented some apartments. I rented an apartment once in a neighborhood that was so bad that I walked past a police car and I knocked on the police window. I was in my 20s. And I looked at the officer in the squad car and I said, "Hey, I just rented an apartment in this neighborhood." I said, "What do you think of this neighborhood?" And he looked at me and he goes, you should move. I've lived in some low-rent places. I have a little bit of experience with this, being poor, okay? There was a good period of my life I didn't have much money. So I lived in some apartments that were below market. My point is that if I'm just getting my feet underneath me and I'm just escaping chronic homelessness, maybe living in an apartment that costs the average would be above my means. And one of the things that I'm not embarrassed to say is that some people have greater means than other people, and people who have less means probably should look for solutions that their means would accommodate. I know that's making a lot of common sense and probably makes some people uncomfortable, but probably an $800 a month rent makes a lot more sense for somebody. And as we just heard, we do have some options, and maybe we should be taking all this money and making some more of those $800 a month options available. Frankly, I like that idea a lot better, making sure that there are $800 beds to rent for people who want a pathway out of chronic homelessness. Here's what I'm trying to say. You're talking about people working fast food or working hourly, and this is my point exactly. If they don't get a better job in 6 months, what happens in 6 months? They will lose their housing.
Well,
This is very concerning to
agree.
me.
So I'm writing down all of the feedback that we're giving in this committee. We want to have oversight of these grants and these programs. That's why I'm happy to meet with you here. For the housing specialist, we have to have some program guidelines, and staff is going to have to let us know if our feedback cannot be received because there's confines of the grant. So what you're saying is that our housing options that are presented and utilizing these rapid rehousing funds with case management and with this housing specialist, which I still don't understand who's doing the case management. Is it the housing specialist?
It's not the housing specialist. It would be San Diego Rescue Mission.
Okay, so perfect. San Diego Rescue Mission case managers are going to be doing the planning and the workshopping with each client, and the housing specialist is going to be working with landlords, cutting checks, and doing that side of things, and basically establishing, budget and criteria and benchmarks for each client.
That's correct.
Right? So the housing specialist is really, we get to create a position, right, that can lock these funds and reserve them for those that are most eligible and most likely to be successful. So that's number one. But the housing options should be market rate, but not above average. And I completely agree with that. We need our San Diego Rescue Mission case managers to be getting creative, looking at how people can start sharing as roommates, right? Our folks in the Boyne Creek Navigation Center, now that they're going to have, there's already bonding happening there. There's camaraderie and support because you've gone through this experience together and you're going through rehabilitation. If there's an opportunity for a rooming arrangement, now we have rental assistance funds to get those folks into a shared apartment. So we're using average rents. The ceiling is $20,000. I don't know if it needs to be that much either, but programmatically, I think we're on the same page, right? The expectation from the committee is that the housing options that are being provided are not above average, because the folks coming out of the Boyne Creek Navigation Center, if you're in a status of homelessness and in a status of dire economic straits where you cannot maintain your housing, or have had life circumstances that make it difficult for you to maintain your housing and your job and your livelihood, it's economically going to be very hard for you to sustain this after we go away. So I completely agree with you on that, Mayor.
Why would we use average, which is like, to think mathematically instead of talking about the average, let's talk about the median. If we're talking about people who have a sub-median income, why would we try to accommodate them in a rental housing unit that is designed for somebody with a median income? Why wouldn't we look at an option like the one Pete just gave us, which is a 25th percentile option? And why wouldn't we then design our programs around numbers based on the 25th percentile prices? I am begging you, on behalf of the hundreds more people that you could assist, to sharpen your calculator on this, okay? I'm asking you to increase the fishes and loaves, please, because you've got a lot of money here. And this is what I am desperately trying to get everybody in this room to understand. Please, God, tell me someone understands what I'm about to say here. If this person does not have sufficient monthly income to sustain the cost of their housing, giving them 6 months of additional housing money and then pulling the wool out from underneath them in 6 months is of no assistance to them at all. It's illusory. It's just like when we gave people motel vouchers for 21 days, and then in 21 days, boom, they're on the street again, and they're in another panic cycle of chronic unsheltered homelessness.
Mayor, I completely
didn't
agree
make
with
sense.
you. I don't want to see any of our folks being put in luxury housing when their budget can't sustain it 6 months later.
Well, are we putting in people in housing? Are we making housing plans for people to go into housing that costs more on a monthly basis than they have available either housing assistance or personal revenue to afford? Is that what we're doing?
If I may illustrate to answer that point a little bit, housing first principles, whether or not politically that is something that is amenable to the committee, regardless, housing principle dictates that somebody can stabilize their income if they are in housing. Somebody who's unsheltered, living unsheltered, will have a much more difficult time acquiring work, obtaining sustainable income. Once we are able to house somebody, then we can start to address the higher level needs, including work, employment, school, everything else. So the idea is with this assistance, we can get folks into housing first, make sure they stabilize, address other needs like maybe substance use, mental illness, lack of income, those things. Those things are much easier to address once they're in a home and off the street. So that's the idea. The other thing is the $20,000 is a ceiling. That doesn't mean we have to spend $20,000 on every individual. It's not a given $20,000 grant.
But you did spend $10,000 on every individual at MAC.
For that program, yes. This is a different program.
I don't care. You were in charge of it.
I think that
And
that was
that's-
an appropriate ceiling, Mayor. We talked, in speaking earlier about the 6 months. And here's where, Jonathan, I don't know if you're addressing the committee's concerns, which is that folks are not going to be receiving these rental, I would hope, folks are not going to be receiving these rental assistance funds right away. These should be reserved for people who have worked within our programs to some capacity or can demonstrate a clear plan and path of how they're going to be self-sufficient after the funding has expired. So I want you to come back to us with greater descriptions of how the funds are going to be programmed to ensure that people are not going to be left in the lurch, that we are providing assistance for folks that haven't had the opportunity to save money to get into housing, and we're going to be coordinating housing resources for them that they can afford. Now, I say that with a big asterisk because the housing market is way beyond what average person can afford, right? So unless we're relocating people, we're going to have a really hard time finding that local housing.
I'm going to say this, and I know you all just think I'm politically grandstanding, and that's fine. I don't give a damn what you think of me, okay? But I am telling you right now, what you just told me, Jonathan, is that you want to provide housing for people who are in the throes of addiction, who do not have income, and who at the moment cannot sustain themselves. And what I have been begging the community at large and our council to understand is that we have an option, okay, for people who are suffering addiction, who are not anywhere near making a decision to help themselves out of addiction. It's called conservatorship. You've got $2.5 million on the table here. We've got a group that we've been in conversations with, Generations Healthcare, who's building and maintains right now at least 120 beds of conservatorship care in Lakeside through the county. If we gave them $2.5 million and helped them find a place to do it, we could create what people need if they are so addicted that they cannot work, okay? And that causes them to be homeless. They need conservatorship. So now let me finish, because you've interrupted me a few times, and I'm not trying to be disagreeable about saying you interrupted me, but
I'm hearing you.
but you have. So I just want to finish this thought, and I'm really praying and hoping that you'll actually agree with me on this. I'm trying to I'm not trying to make a political grandstand speech. I'm actually trying to win you over on this. We can help these people, but it's not by giving them their own apartment to get loaded in. That is the God's honest truth. That is not going to help anybody. If they are not well enough that they are on their way to having self-sufficiency, then giving them an apartment to get strung out in is not going to solve their problem. Creating with this same dollars conservatorship opportunity, creating a facility here in our city where people who are screaming at a light post at 2 p.m. could get off the street, get into a safe, warm bed, have 3 hots a day, a warm shower, medical care, dental care, be loved on, cared for, have medical care. We could do that with this money. But what you're proposing to me is somebody who has no visible means of support to give them 6 months in an apartment by themselves, and it hasn't worked. It won't work. It's a horrible idea. In 6 months, they're going to be in the exact same circumstance because somebody who is suffering addiction does not need a place of their own to live. What they need is a program where they're getting some help. Now, we'd love them all to be able to get sober voluntarily, but some percentage, and my guess, out of the 170 people, maybe it's a handful of them that need this conservatorship in our city. But imagine we have 170 unhoused people as of the last point in time count. Imagine if we could get 17 of them into a conservatorship facility. And then when we went to ask the other 160, however many, imagine that they said, well, I don't want to go involuntarily, so I'm willing to go. And we could also create a place for them to go where they could work a voluntary program. I think we should invest, what Green Oak Ranch Ministries has done to master lease and to be able to provide a bed that people can afford to rent for $800. Why are we sitting here talking about people coming off the street trying to come up with $2,200 for an apartment? That's the most ludicrous thing I have ever heard in my life. If I was coming off the streets, if I had an hourly job, the first thing I do, as I did when I had a low-income paying job, is I went and I got myself a roommate. It was the first thing I did. I had roommates, and we always talk like people should have their own palace to live in. I'm sorry, no, if you have 15 or 25th percentile income, you need to have roommates. I have a roommate. I'm married to my roommate now. I've had a roommate all but 4 years of my life. I've always had roommates. Having roommates, there's no shame in it. So saying we're going to put people in their own one-bedroom Hilton to get loaded on heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine, and then in 6 months, our government money runs out, and not only are they dead in our apartment, but they have no revenue. Tell me that's not what you're telling me, because it sounds a lot like that's exactly what you're telling me, Jonathan, and that's hurting my heart. I'm not having a mental disagreement with you. I'm having a disagreement of the heart here. I'm not sold. I'm really not. I'm hurt by what you're proposing because it's going to hurt people, not help them. I really, truly, in my heart, believe that, and it really is painful in my soul because I want to see people get healed. Okay, we need to help people get off the street, get free of their addiction. We need to provide that bottom rung on the ladder where they can pull themselves up. But giving people, you're talking about giving people 6 months, $20,000, and you're telling me that the person that you're aiming that towards is the Housing First recipient who is so strung out that they have no revenue. It doesn't make sense to put somebody into a housing unit that they cannot afford. If they can't afford it today, then on month 6, they're still not going to be able to afford it. And you can't change the reality that that's logic. And you cannot overcome my logic. That is infallible logic. They are not going to get sober and get a job in 6 months. Our money, our taxpayer dollars that people went out and worked their asses off for is up in smoke. People's hard work that they suffered to earn that money is gone to no effect. And that human being that we put into that apartment is no better off. Now explain to me how we did the Lord's work there. We didn't. We need to get that person some real help. We need to make low cost, hopefully market rate affordable. I mean, this Green Oak Ministries program, that's not even subsidized, right? There's not $1 of private or public subsidy going into that. We just found an organization with a good heart that said, you know what, we can take some low-income apartments, we can master lease them, and we can create a place for people to live at $800 instead of $2,200. There are options here. Do we care to find them? And are we going to be shamed about putting people in an $800 a month apartment? And are we going to say they have to have a $2,200 a month apartment to get loaded on fentanyl and kill themselves in? Is that I'm supposed to be ashamed of where I'm at on this? I don't think so. You got enough money here to help many, many, many people, but you're condensing it and giving so much to each individual. A person needs to have revenue. It could be a long-term subsidy or it could be a job, but they have to have recurring revenue that is not going to be pulled out from underneath them in 6 months. What I proposed when we were giving $10,000 each for homelessness prevention to people who weren't even homeless, I said to Pete, I said, wouldn't you rather have $3,500 to pay first and last to get somebody into an apartment? But that is predicated on them having the monthly recurring revenue to be able to afford that housing unit. I want somebody to walk to the podium right now, speak into the microphone, and explain to me how the person who cannot afford their rent today is magically going to afford to be able to pay it in 6 months, especially when you're telling me that they're heroin addicted. I want somebody to give some voice to that and actually defend that, because it's indefensible. It makes no sense.
I will add, this program is not limited to 6 months. This goes through
that
June
would be
30th,
my
2027.
recommendation.
So this would have up to 2 years of assistance.
Excuse me,
I
Jonathan.
think the
So,
mayor would be happy to hear.
Mayor, our committee has to make recommendations. So I'm taking in what you're saying, and, as much as you are kind of denying my statements, I'm suggesting the same things that you are, which is that the housing options should be below market rate,
Good.
that the folks in this program are going to be housing ready. The concept of housing first, we already are implementing that with our shelters. And when you're in one of our programs, whether it's safe parking or a shelter, you're allowed to spend a little bit of time in there to get to a place where you can get into a place and to be at a mental state, right? These funds, I don't know if these are recommendations that we can even include. So I'm going to need staff to tell me what the committee is allowed to change, right, and recommend without having to go back to the state. Can you give me just a few parameters on that very briefly, what we're allowed to change or advise?
Yeah, so perhaps it's misleading by saying 20,000 per household. That's just the metric that we use to calculate the budget for 2.5. The bottom line is
per
we have
household, is that per person? Because you said it was different.
20,000 is per household, the 200 per individual is for the landlord incentive.
Okay, so I think that there's a misunderstanding on my end. $200 is per individual, so you could have a household of 4 people.
Would be
each
$800.
individual would be, okay, that's a different
That's right.
conversation. I understand the ceiling. What I want to know is what the committee is allowed to advise and change and what we have to go back to the state for. So if we want to reallocate these funds into a different housing program, I'm guessing we'd have to go back to the state for that. But if we want to advise on how the program is implemented, what are we allowed to advise?
I would say based on what I've heard this morning, everything that's been discussed is eligible with these funds. Again, I think it's misleading breaking them out per household like that, but we have $2.5 million for rapid rehousing for any length of time up through June 30th, 2027.
Okay, so
There's no-
I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Please.
I want us to be able to move on to the next item, so I'm going to continue my comments. And really, I want to provide, when I was preparing for this agenda item, I knew that out of the whole ERF3 grant, right, that the housing specialists and these housing funds would be probably the most robust part of the topic today. So I was prepared to talk about these things, and I think that, one, I hope everybody's writing this down. Housing options should be below market rate. Let's start there. Let's look at the most affordable housing options. That the folks that are eligible for these funds are housing ready. Come back to us and define for us what housing ready means. This is not for housing anybody. Sorry, these are for housing ready. How does this program relate to conservatorship? So I wanted to speak to your conservatorship comment, Mayor. These funds are essential for those who are required to engage in a conservatorship because they're put on a housing plan. And these types of funds, if any of our folks serving in any of our programs end up in a conservatorship, then they still need housing funds. That's been my biggest criticism of conservatorships, is that where's the housing? Because people still need a place to go. Are we going to house them in jail? Are we going to house them in an institution? Are we going to house them in the market rate housing with assistance? Well, this is one of the ways that the state has been able to define how people get housing. They're supposed to come up with a housing plan, right? They tell the judge, I'm going to come up with a housing plan. I'm going to, I'm going to engage in treatment and services. I'm compelled to do this. How are they going to do it? This funding can go towards clients that are in a conservatorship, and we should be providing these funds to those folks. Is it a long-term solution? No, but isn't the goal of conservatorship in some point not to have a lifelong dependency on the state, but to stabilize yourself? So these funds are essential for conservatorship. So I think that, as much as I support your idea of conservatorship housing, let's bring that forward, and maybe we can get grants for that too. I'm all about that. But these funds, whether it's conservatorship programming or other programming, right? So this is the other piece of feedback that the committee's providing now for the Housing Specialist Program Guidelines, is that the housing that's prioritized should not only be low cost, it should be programmed in some way. That's the best type of housing for people that are leaving the Boyne Creek Navigation Center. It's not housing where they're completely on their own, but housing where they can come home to somebody, right? Maybe come home to a house manager. Maybe they're coming home to, a nursing assistant. Maybe they're coming home to a roommate, right? Or a family. What makes me sad on here is that we have family reunification costs where we have, are in a position to pay people to support their family members. I mean, rental assistance is one thing. Everybody's got to chip into the household costs. But if you don't want to open up your heart and home to your family member, even when they have done the work, they're in the Boyne Creek Navigation Center, they're doing all the work. They're doing everything they're supposed to do, and you still want to open up your home to them? So that breaks my heart. But programmed housing should be prioritized, and shared housing should be prioritized. So what we have here for program guidelines: market rate or below, right? Low cost housing. That is for people who are housing ready, not housing for anybody. And it should be, the ideal housing situation is also programmed housing. I think that will lead to a sustainable service where we're not just paying for someone's housing for 6 months and pulling the rug out from them. And there's more, right? There's more. How we're finding the right landlords, right? Setting up someone on their career and education path. There's a lot that needs to be included in this program. And I know that it will be, right? I expect that it will be, but I have to say it explicitly, that there's a couple of ways that these funds need to be used. So Mayor, would you agree below average market rate housing, that it's for folks that are housing ready, and that shared housing and programmed housing are the priorities?
I agree with those points, absolutely.
Because I don't want to have to go back to the state and say, okay, we're not going to take this, $2.7 million, when we could program it in a way that we think will be successful.
Well, that's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking to reject the money. I'm asking to use it in a way that, what you're saying.
If you support it,
makes
then
more sense.
this is, our goal is to build consensus here and provide some helpful feedback. Maybe programs look different in San Diego, in different cities. There's a bunch of different programs. I've applied housing assistance funds to clients before, and the landlord incentive part is really, really hard. What I would like to see, can we use some of these funds to market the program so that we can at least test the waters and see how landlords are going to react? Because suddenly there's going to be a new market of potential tenants for them that are receiving assistance, right? They have this source of income from the city, that there's this $200 incentive program, right? So I don't know if we can use any funds for that. Could you tell us that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is meant to be one of the responsibilities of the housing specialist.
Okay, but
Just to be clear, this is just a description of the funds, not the program,
but
which I
what
think is
is
one of
the
the concerns.
budget for marketing? Do we have any funds available?
We can use the fund that we were approved for with the housing specialist. We have $386,000 for a 2-year position. That was originally budgeted for 3 years, so we will have some ability to reappropriate those funds.
Okay. So I would like to see included in the implementation of the encampment resolution funds some marketing budget for the landlord incentive program. Because we need those housing providers in our community and landlords, property owners, which I think it's funny that you say that I'm 51% for the tenant.
I'm not trying to
Because
put
I
words in your
think
mouth.
I
apologize.
just try to do my best with everybody who is willing to work with me. But they don't know necessarily that what the city's doing. It can be very hard to communicate this to a landlord. So let's try to put a little money aside for marketing so that they know that the city is a trusted source. So those are my thoughts on the housing specialist. I know we have more to go over in the encampment resolution funds.
Can I offer one more thought?
Let's add that.
If I was king for a day and had the magic wand, this is what I would do. Can you go back to that slide with the 2 million, 2.5 million? If I were king for a day, I would divide the amount, and what I would do is I would take the $2.5 million. I would put half of that, 1.125 million, into a program, something similar to what Green Oak Ranch Ministries has done, master lease, subsidize to the tune of, if they're able to do it at market for 800, we subsidize it for 400. That way you can get in there and you can pay $400 a month and maximum tenancy 1 year. You're out after a year. And then you can move into something market rate at 800 if you are not able to find a better income and move up. That would provide 2,812 months or 234 years of housing subsidy for people escaping chronic homelessness so that they could have a place for $400 a month. And then I would take the other 1.125 for people who are ready for self-sufficiency, and I would give them $5,000 for first, last, and incidentals, with us directly paying first and last to the landlord, and counseling. So that if you had somebody, because I've met plenty of people at the NAV Center who we help them get into their own place, right? Yeah, and they're doing just fine. But they just needed to get back on their feet. And if we had 5,000, not 20,000 to give them, what I am submitting to you is you can't solve someone's problem who has a $20,000 problem. You can't.
And I agree,
you can't solve that problem.
$5,000 is enough to solve a lot of people's problems. I agree.
You can, for the person who needs a boost, 5,000 is that boost. For somebody who has a long-term chronic addiction problem and you're trying to give them.
The only thing I
The city
disagree
of
with you,
Vista's
I
not
would
big
say
enough.
2 years for some sort of transitional program like that instead
The
of one.
city is not big enough to help people who have a 2-year problem. We're not. We need to keep going back. The state's going to have to give us another $8 million if we're going to do that. What I'm saying is $5,000 to get back on your feet, or if you have that long-term chronic problem, that we can fund. Does that person have other money from the state of California? They have no. If somebody's on heroin and they have no income, what state means do they typically have? Do they get any other assistance from it? If we could provide $400 a month for 12 months, what other assistance would they typically have access to?
I think that'll probably be on a case-by-case basis, but I couldn't say.
Pete, what have you seen? Is there anything out
Like
there?
SSDI and food stamps.
No, go. Your thoughts are relevant here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the reality, to ease your mind, Mayor, as well, is that the people that you are like afraid that might receive this money, they're probably not even going to qualify because they're not going to be housing ready. They're not going to be in a stable mindset. I don't know. Maybe that's what the money is for. I'm not the one managing it or running it, et cetera. It is going to massively influence landlords if I can incentivize someone. Hey, they're going to have financial assistance and I can incentivize this. It is going to get a lot of people housed, that's for sure.
The
But there
5,000
is-
will, the
there's-
200
I
won't.
think that you need, the reality is this is going to help a lot of people that are housing ready, that are able to be stable. I have a lot of people at the Boynton Creek Navigation Center right now that this would massively help them and into their homelessness.
Pete, what
But
we're
then
arguing
for the
about-
people that
what we're
aren't,
arguing
then you
about,
got to
what my point is,
incentivize.
Pete, is instead of giving people $20,000,
Yeah.
we should be using much smaller amounts.
Yeah, and
Because we
I
can
think
help
that that's where there'll be
hundreds more people.
flexibility. I think there'll be flexibility within the program. I think that's what he's saying. Like that's just the market cap. But I think that
It's
the
too high
program
of a cap
itself-
because the last time we gave them a cap of 10,000, they gave everybody 10,000,
Yeah.
which is why I won't give them a cap of 20,000
Okay,
or
Pete, I'm
10,000.
gonna ask you to-
Because they gave everybody
and sit
10,000
down.
last time. It wasn't thoughtfully done.
Yeah.
So-
They didn't try to multiply the number of
Mayor,
people
I'm
that
going
can
to
help.
incorporate your comments now. Thank you, Pete. There is value in what you're saying where we can provide an initial amount, right? Does entering into this program guarantee that you get 6 months assistance? You know, I don't necessarily think that it should. If your income, if your budget says that you're ready to start paying on your own and your budget says you only need $5,000 to get through, then we only need to give you $5,000. So, you know, how do we articulate that so that it's very clear direction for staff? Maybe, Jonathan, you can reflect to us what you would expect from the program in terms of really limiting the amount of funds that we're giving. And I'll share, you know, your concerns, Mayor. I don't like just giving money to landlords when the cost of housing is so high. And I know rents are going down right now, but, you know, it doesn't feel very comfortable to be giving market rate funds away. I do like the model of subsidy that you're describing where, you know, I tend to think that, you know, it could create sometimes historically it's created a slumlord situation, right? So we have to bar against that. But are there ways that we can subsidize housing, right, at a lower cost than paying market rate housing for someone to a landlord that's, you know, indifferent about the client's needs? So, Jonathan, if we are to incorporate the feedback that the funds should be given, you know, there's incremental states, right, where somebody is going to benefit from $5,000 and then someone's not going to be able to get housed unless they have assistance for 6 months. And I know that that's a reality, you know, that we see within this population that we work with. Is the housing specialist and the case manager, are they able to just administer that $5,000?
In fact, we don't have to put, and we don't expect to put any maximum assistance award to any client. We will simply say we have rehousing assistance funds available. We won't say it's 20,000, we won't say it's 10, we won't say it's 5, we won't say it's 6 months, we won't say it's 12 months. We'll simply supply them with whatever assistance they need, step them down gradually so that they're taking over more and more of the rent until they reach a point where they're actually stable with enough income to take on the rent themselves.
For the moment, I could get past this if you would change this 20,000 to 10,000 and you could double the 125 to 250.
I
And then I
disagree
could-
with that.
You disagree with that?
125, which 125?
The 125
Oh, 125
households
people.
will become
No,
250.
so I think it needs to be more than
Mayor,
$10,000.
let me clarify, though. This is simply a number that we gave to the state to justify the number of 2.5 million that they gave us. How we implement it is completely up to us. We don't have to give
Are
them,
we going to put a ceiling per individual on it?
if that's what the direction of the council
Well,
is, we can do that.
absolutely, there has to be a ceiling.
I don't think it should be $10,000. I think it should be $15,000.
Well, I like 15 better than 20.
Okay, then we can recommend to the whole council $15,000. And I can justify my reason based on market rate rents and an idea that we should have a 6-month program. So that's my rationale for that.
But can you,
I don't want to just like eliminate the funds to just eliminate them.
no, I understand. Well, listen, can you explain to me seriously how somebody, I'm asking you as a human being right now, tell me how somebody is going to get 6 months of assistance and they're going to be able to.
Mr. Mayor, it's on a case-by-case basis, and I want to leave,
Of somebody that 6 months is going to solve a problem for them. Explain to me what that would look like.
so that could look like, here's a hypothetical. It could look like a client who is exiting the Bonny Creek Navigation Center who's housing ready. And maybe she is like, got all of her income set up for her basic needs, but she, with the assistance of her case manager, and the San Diego Rescue Mission is actually really good at this. They're good at career development and education. Maybe she's entered into a technical program where she can get training, and in 6 months, she can improve her income. So that's an example where somebody could be housing ready, receive a little bit more robust assistance, and then be able to increase their income. I want to let the program be available for that. And we're giving direction to recommend that for the general population, that they are going to have below market rate options, that we're going to be prioritizing shared housing, and we're going to be initiating the lowest amount of rental assistance first.
There's agreement everywhere here if we're able to have the time to discuss. You talked about somebody who's engaged in workforce training. Make the $5,000 number $30,000 and let some of that money be for housing. Anybody who is pursuing workforce training earnestly and with some degree of success, like a passing grade from that program, to the point where they're going to have an opportunity to have better income. This is where my point of view says invest heavily to help somebody attain the tool that this is teaching somebody to fish rather than throwing a fish at their head. And this is what government likes to do. They like to throw a fish and hit him in the eyeballs and go, here you go, good luck, you know, and in 6 months, you're starving again. Please let us buy people fishing rods and teach them how to fish instead of throwing fish at people's faces. This workforce development and training, what you just said, is
And that's just one example.
it's underfunded here, but the person who doesn't have a job because of addiction or severe mental illness, that person's not going to be better in 6 months
They could
with not
benefit
without
from a
it.
conservatorship. They could get shared sober living housing. There's a lot of
This money's
options
not going
for
to
them.
anybody in conservatorship, is it?
It's going towards housing that people in conservatorship could benefit from.
Well, people in
Yes.
a conservatorship, they're not choosing their own housing. I mean, the government is providing them a house to live in. You cannot be conserved without the government providing you housing. It doesn't work that way. You become you're in the custody of the state at that point. And the state, if you're in conservatorship, has to give you a place to live.
And we're going
Otherwise-
to have future discussions about conservatorship housing in the city of Vista. Is that right?
I would love to.
hope so.
I would love to.
So where's the disagreement here, Mayor? You want to lower the threshold. We can bring it back to the whole council. We can make our arguments there.
Right.
I think it should be $15,000.
No, that's good. I'm just saying, I'm good with increasing. I would like anybody, and you came up with one hypothetical, and I think it's a decent one, the woman who wants to go to school and better herself. And what I am trying to express to you is the great agreement that I have with you on that hypothetical. What I am challenging anyone in this room to do is to come up with the hypothetical that involves somebody not bettering themselves, who is an addict or severely mentally ill, who's going to take 6 months or 12 months of housing assistance from the city of Vista, and then magically not be homeless again after that money runs dry.
So we're
Nobody's coming up to the microphone. It's an open mic. Everyone's invited.
for the
Anybody in
well,
room,
the
anybody
chair
here?
is going to have to allow them to speak. But I will just say one
Nobody's putting their
thing.
hand in the air. Nobody's even willing to posit the idea that somebody who's severely
Our
mentally ill
pilot
or addicted-
program resulted in 75% of the program participants still being housed over a year later. So do we have any updated statistics
Well, the
on
pilot program for
previous programs?
homelessness prevention, but that was for people who were housed. None of those people were homeless. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Do you
Not
have,
unless people
do
are
you have
homeless,
data
so
and
of course 75%
statistics
are
on
housed.
similar type programs of rapid rehousing and the status of people being housed? Because this is also a data problem, Mayor, where when these programs are implemented, we can be reviewing them. That's why the standing committee is here. We're going to continue to review this. If you don't like the program, I understand, but we have to make recommendations. So maybe you can bring back to us and provide for the full council some information about the longevity of these programs.
So, again, this description of the funds just describes the funding and the funding level for each of the eligible costs. This does not describe an actual program. The program has been designed preliminarily by staff and was included with the RFP for the outreach provider, which includes the Housing Stabilization Services. As mentioned, San Diego Rescue Mission scored the highest on those proposals, but we are waiting for the March 25th review of their 4-month agreement with the current outreach contract. Assuming that goes well, we will propose a contract to the City Council for the ERF 3 contract, which will include the program design. At that time, I would recommend the City Council might discuss those limits at that time for them to be able to implement those into the contract with San Diego Rescue Mission.
Well, you're getting our feedback now about
Yes.
changing some
We'll
of the
include all
limits
of
to
that.
help a few additional folks.
All of which are possible in this
Right.
description of the program.
Is there
funds.
any other feedback that the committee can provide at this time, Mayor?
No, I'll just apologize to you for my anger and my frustration, which is coming out about the way we have been spending money. It's not finding the mark. And, you know, this idea of simply providing first and last, which would be summiting Mount Everest for some of the people at the NAV Center. And then you took giving people first and last, and you went, let's do it 11 times and subsidize 2 years. I am trying to help 90% of the people who a small boost would change their life. And I'm telling you, we don't have the money as a city, and the state hasn't yet put up, when they give us $30 million for 3 years, now we can talk about providing real solutions for the severely mentally ill and the severely addicted. They're not giving us that kind of money. So bringing into it this idea of subsidizing somebody's living for 2 years, or, you know, I want somebody to come up and advocate for the hypothetical or the person that they helped at the BCNC or any of our other service providers, and tell me the person, give me their story that we've helped that this 6 months, who can't afford the housing we're putting them in, that they're going to be able to afford it 6 months later. So I understand this is conceptual at this point. We're going to come back with program design, but I am begging, help the greatest number of people. Help people who a small amount would make a big difference. And MAC didn't do that. Lifeline didn't do that. And it's because of the way we designed the program. And we need to be much more thoughtful how we design this program to help the maximum number. I want that 57% number, Nanette, where 57% successful exit, right? Something like that. I want to get that number up, and I want more throughput. I want to help more people out of chronic homelessness into housing. I want to have the best numbers in the state because we devised a program that helped the greatest number of people. There are a lot of people that are in deep, severe, conditions that we need to focus on. That's where the conservatorship comes into play. The person who today can't afford it and in 6 months is not going to be able to afford it because of severe mental illness or addiction, that's the person that needs conservatorship. The person who has got SSDI or has got a job, that person should be able to relatively afford it today. Giving them first and last, $5,000 is all the money in the world to some people. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. $20,000 is an amount of money that, I'm going back, not that far ago, 20 years ago. I mean, that kind of money would have been life-changing for me. And I just don't understand, if you took away everything I have today, if you gave me $5,000, I could certainly figure out how to get a job, and that $5,000 would get me my first and last, and I'd have a house. So okay, I don't have anything else. We have found some agreement here.
So, and taking that last point of feedback for program guidelines, at minimum, first and last, but I think maximum 6 months. I think that that's a reasonable program, you know? Do we need to be subsidizing someone's rent for a year? I want someone to be more housing ready and self-sufficient if we're gonna be giving them these funds. But I appreciate, right, first and last, I think that that's very formative for these types of programs. It's an initial start. And then where circumstances prevail over, you know, our best hopes for someone, maximum 6 months. And that's just loose guidelines, you know. I'm not setting any steep prohibitions at this time. One moment, Pete. But that is where I think that we should begin. I would really like to move on to the next item.
I'll just say very quickly, I could go 12 months if it was every month being stepped down by 8%.
Right. That's
So that, you know,
another point of view
you
is
get
how
100%
it's tiered
month
down.
one, 92%, then on and on until in the last month you get zero assistance. And we're expecting that person, and we've discussed in day one that in 12 months, you know, it's going to be less every month, and we expect you to get on your feet. If it's truly about helping somebody get on their feet and they have a plan to afford their housing when the subsidy ends, I'm okay with it because that is transformative. If it's simply subsidizing a person, I'm sorry, Jonathan set me off. I apologize, Jonathan. You set me off when you're talking about putting addicts into housing who have no plan to get to pay for housing when our subsidy runs out. Because all you're doing is it's the churn. It's what Chris Meckison calls the churn. And we're going to have these people on the street again in 6 months, and that's not solving the problem. It's just lighting taxpayer money on fire, and it solves the problem for that person for 6 months, but it doesn't really heal that
think we're in
person.
agreement.
So yes, so we can move on. All
right. So
I think you
let's-
you got some idea.
Let's take these next slides on the encampment resolution. Just going through.
Yeah, the discussion covered most of everything that was on the next slide. Basically, we're going to have the next outreach contract, San Diego Rescue Mission coming to City Council soon. Same with the safe parking contract, which will come before June 25th, which is the next expiration date for that contract. 100% obligation of VRF3 funds by June 30th, 26. 100% expenditure by June 30th, 2027. And that concludes the presentation.
All right. So, Pete, I want to recognize you. Any final comments on this? Yep, come to the stand.
Is it, I guess it's more for you, Jonathan. I could have just asked you and not in front of everybody. But is this, would it be illegal in the sense of using that money to, like, because it would be per se not housing first, to be able to incentivize people? So a big thing for me as an outreach worker is like you're trying to incentivize people, you're trying to encourage people to make a decision or, you know, guide them to make a decision. And one of those things that I've in my heart has been for a long time is I could have got a lot more people to choose to go to recovery if I could tell them, hey, if you go to Green Oaks Ranch or In His Steps or Interfaith, et cetera, if you go to this program, at the end of, if you graduate, you would be also, you would be available for those 6 months of rapid rehousing. And I think as an outreach worker, you could get a lot more people, and then you would be really, really assured that that person is housing ready because they've faced their issue of addiction. They have a bit of sobriety under them, and they've had support.
So to respond to
But
that,
does that go against
my
housing
understanding,
ready?
Pete-
Or not housing first?
my understanding, Pete, is that the funds are available and will be available through the city of Vista and through our case management contractor. So if they're exited another, so this is a good question, Jonathan. If they've exited one of our programs and they've gone into another program, are they still eligible for these rental assistance funds?
Both are very good and important questions. So when we say housing ready, it does carry a very specific legal term, which does conflict with housing first. So legally, they are mutually exclusive. However, when it comes to an example like what Pete mentions, where you want to incentivize a client with accessing whatever resources they need, like any counseling for substance use, mental disorder, mental illness, It would be illegal to have the housing be contingent on accepting that resource. However, we would include that as part of the case management through the San Diego Rescue Mission or whoever the outreach provider ends up being. Whereas it's somebody who would be receiving that case management, the case manager can decide whether or not there is somebody who would be eligible for these funds if they can sustain their housing. If it's determined they cannot stay in their housing after the assistance ends, they would not be eligible. And one of those factors could be the continued use of substances or anything else like that.
Ask that question just slightly differently. Are we lawfully obliged to apprise someone in contact with the city that this program is available? Or do we have the ability to choose who we inform the availability of? Obviously, we have to have some public notice that goes on the website and the front door of City Hall, but do we have to call everybody who calls us and goes, hey, I heard you have money? Do we have to tell them if they're not asking to apply for it, do we have to tell them, hey, there's this program? Or could we allow our providers who have helped people out of addiction, who have helped them get some sobriety, could we allow them to be the primary informers to people in need, such that it just happened that they might have primary knowledge? We're not restricting access. We're simply saying maybe it's not going to be something we're going to proactively advertise because we want it to be reserved by lack of publicity. See what I'm saying?
I would prohibit these funds being programmed to funnel into any particular program, but I would agree it should be contingent on case management, and that likely I would expect that case management will find that folks are most suitable for housing that is programmed.
Can we do that? Can we make it contingent on case management?
That is absolutely, they will require case management. They can only be enrolled for these housing funds through the case management. Yep.
So, and that's where we get to have more robust conversations with our
That's
program
right.
provider. So you have our initial feedback, and I expect this to be incorporated into the encampment resolution grant contracts that we establish going forward. Okay, and now we're moving on to continuing rental assistance because we have additional funds available in addition to the grant.
Yes, thank you. I think this discussion provides a great segue to the next item that I know the committee is eager to discuss, which is continuing rental assistance in support of the strategic plan. The homelessness prevention strategy of the strategic plan began with a homelessness prevention pilot program administered by the former North County Lifeline between August 2020 and August 2022. The program awarded up to $5,000 for up to 3 months of assistance to households making 30% AMI or less. The pilot program provided $440,109 to prevent 294 Vista residents and 96 households from losing their housing. The Exodus Recovery Outreach and Housing Navigation Program, operating between September 2020 and October 2024, provided rental assistance to households meeting the HUD Category 2 definition of homeless by being at imminent risk of homelessness, which will be defined further later in this presentation. This program provided $40,387 to prevent 24 Vista residents and 8 households from losing their housing. The Vista Emergency Housing Assistance Program, or VHAP, was administered by MAC between January and December 2024. The program provided up to $10,000 for up to 6 months of assistance to households making 65% AMI or less. The VHAP administered $1.4 million to prevent 362 Vista residents and 132 households from losing their housing. Since adoption, the strategic plan administered $1,880,496 to prevent 680 Vista residents from experiencing homelessness. On November 12, 2024, the City Council appropriated $200,000 from year-end fund balance to continue rental assistance, with direction for staff to consider including rapid rehousing assistance with those funds. Recently, on March 11, 2025, the City Council accepted and awarded ERF 3 funds, which, as previously discussed, includes $2.5 million in rapid rehousing assistance funds. Staff recommend the new rental assistance program to return to emergency assistance, with assistance awarded to residents meeting the HUD Category 2 definition of homeless, which include the which include the loss of housing within 14 days of application for assistance, no subsequent residents identified, any lack of resources or support networks to obtain other permanent housing. Meeting this definition for eligible awards would allow for AMI flexibility and not require an AMI threshold to be established. Additional considerations with the recommendations would require quick payments, with awarded applicants requiring assistance to be paid to housing providers within 14 days of application. Assistance is recommended to be paid directly to housing providers to ensure program efficacy and not affect beneficiary income, which would allow beneficiaries to remain eligible for other public assistance programs that are based on income. To continue rental assistance in support of the strategic plan, staff recommend the committee direct staff to publish an RFP to solicit an administrator of an emergency rental assistance program in accordance with the above recommendations. If this recommendation is approved, a contract for an administrator is expected to be recommended to council before the end of the fiscal year. This concludes staff's presentation.
I want to apologize to Lifeline because they did not hand out $10,000 apiece. They handed out about $1,400 apiece. Exodus handed out about $1,400 apiece. And then MAC handed out $10,000 apiece. And that made me angry because that's a lot of money to be, why is it that Lifeline was able to prevent 294 people from being homeless for $440,000, but which was $1,400 a piece, but Max spent $10,000 a piece for 362 people. I'm sorry, for 132 households. Let's see, hold on a second. Let me do my math again here because I got households and persons confused. 440,109 divided by 96. They gave $4,500 a piece out. They gave out, but it's still $10,000 per household. That's a lot of money. I just, and I thought we were gonna reprogram these monies, but now we have a lot more money to work with.
So I'm gonna jump in here and reflect on some past conversations we've had, Mayor. So, I understand that you have not been favorable to some of these programs, and
I just have concerns.
I'm interested in reforming them too. So our feedback to staff was that we really want to do both, right? We had limited these initial homelessness prevention funds to only be for folks that are currently housed and needing of assistance in order to retain their housing. And now we have funding from the Encampment Resolution Grant to do that rapid rehousing, to get people into a place. So I believe the need is still there for us to program funds, as we have them available, for rental assistance for homelessness prevention. I think it should be, like with the other program, case management dependent. I think that it should be a limited time frame of assistance. I think that it should be trying to help as many people as possible. And so our options for this are, to really go back out. In my opinion, I think we should go back out, and we should be seeing what vendor could administer these funds. I think we have some folks in mind. We decided what the program parameters were for MAC. I don't want to put any of our contractors or partners on blast in this process because our oversight is really important. And were to go back to a service provider that we've used before, the program might be different than how they've administered it before. That's okay. What I really liked about some of the strengths that I've seen from our partners are, and what I would expect, so staff, please take this direction. What I would like to see from a service provider that's interested in administering these funds is really strong case management background, really strong homelessness prevention background, right? That means that your strengths are in that career and education development, that income supports, right? Really strong income supports and case management aptitude. Also, that more advanced budgeting, right? Getting folks really briefed on their spending habits and how to manage their cost of living, as well as bringing them in more income through income supports and career development, right? So I want to see that type of strength from a service provider, which I think all of our folks have displayed that. We also want them to potentially be able to work with some of our other programs, right? This is not funds that are going to be relevant for the folks that are in our homeless services at this time, but we have other folks in the city that are accessing public resources, right? Maybe they're families that accessed our scholarship fund, right? And I asked for data, and I know that it's been collected, data related to what folks are receiving the rental assistance funds when we were administering through MAC, and if they received any additional public benefits. So I think that there's, families in Vista that are, circumstances happen. Life happens, people lose jobs, people lose family members, and these funds being available for the community is really important so that we can preserve our community and not lose people to a circumstance that they can, overcome with a little bit of help. And I also know that there was kind of the issue with their imminent risk of homelessness. So I'm glad that that's seeing this as being included there. That's going to help people who are in the most urgent state. But really people, providers that are able to come in and do crisis management, because these are going to be folks that are in a crisis situation. So providers that are going to be able to provide that. And I think that that's, I'm okay with AMI flexibility, although I wonder if we should preserve these funds for people who are the most low income. But I'm open to that discussion. So we're gonna have to go back and to the, to our service providers and say, we have additional funds available. We're gonna reprogram, reshape them, reform them a little bit. But we still want these funds to be available for folks as a safety net because, shit happens and it sucks. And I don't want anybody to lose their housing because we only had funds available for people that were on the street. That's a huge complaint we get from the community. Oh, if you're homeless, you get all this support, but if you are working 2 jobs and something happens and you get sick, then there's no help for you, right? But in Vista there is. So I'm glad we're continuing it. I have certainly advocated for it, but we need to do both. So it is possible that these funds are administered by the same group that administers our encampment resolution funds, or does case management for them, perhaps. But I'd like to go back to the public for that. Any thoughts on that, Mayor?
What does AMI flexibility mean? There's no AMI requirement? There's no income limitation?
Right, yeah, the only requirement is that you will be homeless within 14 days without assistance. That's the recommendation, but of course, that's up to the committee to discuss.
So if you're earn $1 billion a year, you can still qualify for this?
Theoretically, yes.
Well, I certainly think there ought to be some kind of, the AMI now is $119,500 for one person. And when I talk to people who are working families in Vista, they think that sounds like a lot of money. Like they think that sounds like a super lot of money, like way more than they make. And a lot of them maybe don't even see themselves being able to earn that kind of money. I don't know, how many people here at the city of Vista get paid a salary that large? That's a lot of money. Most people don't make that much. I don't even know how they come up with that number. It's crazy, but I guess there's a lot of people making a lot of money in this county to bring that number up that high. So the 65% clearly is a reasonable, at some point, if you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, how are we going to help you with a small grant? I mean, your problems are bigger than we can help solve. So there needs to be an AMI limitation.
What do you say to 80% AMI?
I go back to 65% was high enough, in my opinion. I
I think
like the 30%
65%
better.
was limiting. I think 80% is.
Well, we were between 30 and 65%. I like 30% better, but I'd compromise at 65, man. I think 65 is the compromise number.
Okay.
80%'s $100,000 a year. Think about the people that live and work in our community. They don't make $100,000 a year. And if you're making $100,000 a year, my level of sympathy for you is slightly diminished in terms of your needing to have subsidy from the government.
I mean, this would be part of the conversation. I'm not completely sold on anything. This is part of the
What?
guidelines that I would probably put to the full council because I'm not sure.
Why do we keep having conversations about subsidizing people making six-figure incomes? It's anathema to me. I just cannot understand who's earning six figures and is needing a handout from the government.
Well, isn't part of the kind of case management parameters potentially including loss of income? So AMI is an interesting inclusion here at all because a lot of times if someone's going to have imminent risk of homelessness, I would expect that they would have lost their income. Otherwise, how do they get housed in the first place? So programmatically, I just don't know how it plays out, right? It could be somebody who can prove that they have at one point made 80% AMI and recently lost their job and they're at that lower threshold. So can you explain how that will work in terms of case management in the program?
Yeah, so with this program being rental assistance, it would be for housed clients. Most of these clients would not be engaged with case management. Now, if they were to qualify for these funds, we could require them to receive case management if awarded, but most, if not all of these clients won't come in with case management.
So I would expect that in order to access these funds, you have to engage in some sort of case management.
Just, if I could just say 65% of AMI is $77,800. If you are making $78,000 as a single person household, I think that's an appropriate limit. I mean, I think that's way too. I think we should be at 30%, but I could compromise at the 65 because we are just in the. This is, you and I had a conversation once, and it's like, if half of us are paying taxes on a net basis of more than $1, and the other half are paying less than $1 of net tax, how many people in society should the half who are paying subsidize? Should it be the entire other half? Should we subsidize 90% of people in society? Where do the subsidies end, and where at some point do we
I
have
agree with you. I don't
some
think that there should be
self-sufficiency?
just no AMI limit, right? But
Can
I
we do
don't
65?
know. I'm not going to say that. I think
$78,000 per person?
you can. I appreciate your point of view. I
Okay,
just
all right.
don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out programmatically, and I don't know the circumstances. So I would like to hear from the whole council on this one. And there's not, sometimes I feel that way. Sometimes I'm like, let's hear from the whole council on this because I'm
That's
just
fine.
not sure.
I just don't understand how somebody earning $78,000 gets in line ahead of somebody who, is really, we talk about people who are wage earners. We have a community in Vista where 25% lower than the county's AMI. Our city AMI is 25% less than the county. And what number is being used here? It's not the city AMI, it's the county AMI.
Okay, you make a good point.
Our population is a low-income population, lower by 25% than the county. So to me, to have a lower AMI number makes sense. No subsequent residence has been identified. What's that mean?
Basically, they don't have anywhere they can move into from their lost housing.
Okay. We didn't have this 14-day imminent homelessness before. We discussed it, and I certainly thought we were going to, and this is the other reason that I'm so upset about the implementation of this program, is because I thought people were going to be imminently homeless in order to qualify. And it turned out that wasn't a criteria when the program landed. And I was really upset by that. So I very much agree with having a qualification be you're going to be imminently homeless. I had also asked the council, and I was flatly refused, to have a pledge to participate in some financial literacy training. Now, we could say that with different words, call it financial counseling. And I said, make it a pledge. We're not going to imprison you. We're not going to kidnap your firstborn child. We're not going to hunt you down, send you to collections. You know, we're not going to have a bounty hunter come to your house. It's just a promise. If you accept the funds, then you pledge to participate in some financial counseling. And the council flatly turned me down and said, hell no. And I said, well, but if they got themselves into the situation where they were financially insolvent to the point where they're losing their housing, why couldn't we help them create a budget? Why couldn't we give them a little bit of seminar in how to, you know, have a rainy day fund to save?
That was included in Mac's program, and I think that they do really robust financial education. So I would hope that that could be included in the next one.
Well, I'm glad it was included. The council unilaterally, you know, they flatly rejected it. I got no support from council members on that. I see John leaning in.
I think you have a committee recommendation here that allows for that based on what the deputy mayor recommended of having some case management involved in
Yeah,
anyone that we
I
provide.
love it.
That could
Absolutely.
include the
Yes, the case
requirement
management.
for,
Yeah, I would just ask people and make it available and ask them to participate in it. If they don't do it, you know, what can we do? But
I think
I would like
we
to
could
offer
even go
it.
further to require, I mean, case managers are expected to provide
like requiring it.
supportive documentation, right? And part of the supportive documentation for this process is a budget, right? Is a monthly budget using a template.
That
for a
sounds great.
budget. And that's not, you know, the best financial education that someone could get.
A budget's a starting place.
But it's a benchmark that is very simple for someone to accomplish with assistance.
Sure.
And I think it's pretty standard in a lot of case management. So I would expect that it's
Great.
included.
so we'll bring that to council with your recommendation, and then if it's okay, we'll recommend a range of 65 to 80% at the council's discretion.
Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, City Manager. Was that it for this presentation? I think you
Yep,
finished.
that
this.
concludes this item.
Okay, then we're going to go to our next, which is our Permanent Navigation Center options. Welcome back. You're here again.
Good morning, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Do we have this slide? Oh, here it is.
Oh.
Good morning. We're here to present the permanent interim housing facility in Vista. I'll be presenting the shelter tour of modular units that staff and Deputy Mayor took, and Daniel will be presenting on the rest. On February 2021, staff and Deputy Mayor visited 2 sites operating modular units. We met with teams from both sites and discussed operations and construction. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll focus on the construction and costs of the site. On a personal note, we met a very sweet cat at the Victorville Wellness Center. There she is on the screen. She's the welcome wagon for that shelter and welcomed us there, so just had to share. The first location we visited was the Victorville Wellness Center, constructed with Connect Homes modular units. Victorville Wellness Center is a 26,000 square foot homeless navigation center built on 4.5 acres of land to assist with the transition of individuals into stable living situations. The Victorville Wellness Center was built entirely with prefab modules, providing 110 private sleeping rooms equipped with 170 beds. The Victorville Wellness Center provides non-congregate emergency housing, giving each resident/client their own private, dignified dwelling space while integrating services for the Victorville Wellness Center and the Victorville community at large. For this project, the City of Victorville was funded by HCD of an award in the amount of $28 million and $4,058 under Home Key Round 2 for the Wellness Center project, of which $23 million was awarded to construction and $4 million to operational expenses. Construction was extensive and included sewer lift station and grease interceptor, street improvements, fire access road, parking lot, building foundations, anchoring modular buildings to those foundations, electrical wiring, utility connections to the building, finishes to the building, food equipment, wood decking, concrete sidewalks, irrigation, landscaping, fencing, gates, and other miscellaneous improvements. Here you'll see some photos of the bedrooms. You'll also see the kitchen that provides medically tailored diets to clients, bathrooms, which are very important. The shelter also includes a dog run for exercise and a boarding kennel where clients can safely keep their animals while at work or tending to other personal responsibilities. The project, as mentioned, also includes a medical clinic serving not just Victorville Wellness Center residents, but the community at large. The second site we visited was the Azusa Resource Center. The City of Azusa, San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, and San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust have partnered to develop an interim housing site in Azusa to help meet the immediate needs of individuals experiencing homelessness. The Azusa Resource Center hosts 25 interim housing units that house individuals experiencing homelessness in Azusa. This site provides bridge housing, a temporary placement, while connecting clients to permanent housing. This photo is an inside of the Like-Arf units. This product was selected due to their innovative and durable quality of their product, made of post-consumer recycled plastic and HCD approved for use as a shelter, interim, or permanent housing. The modules were factory assembled, locally delivered, and installed at the project site. All modules include finished interiors and fixtures. I'll also mention that because that's kind of filled with a plastic thing, all of these units are floating. So if there were ever to be a flood, they could float, and that was kind of their original design. The site has 24/7 security, privacy fencing, and secured entry to ensure safety of participants and the surrounding areas. Each unit provides a bed, overhead light, AC heat, an outlet, and a door that locks. The site will also provide shared restroom, shower, and laundry facilities, as well as communal meal space with 3 daily meals for residents, offering participants increased access to hygiene and a sense of community. Construction was funded through ARPA and totaled $1,954,843. And city staff from Public Works and Light and Water have contributed to the project with the preparation of utility stubs for the connection to the modules. The city also relied on contractors for the asphalt work and fencing of the site. Portable lighting poles were purchased for the site, and staff opted for box trees and plants for light landscaping. Here you'll see photos of the kitchen, bedroom, and laundry facilities. The restrooms, including a single toilet stall and one with an ADA shower. And here's the dog run at this shelter, along with more shelter views. For a side-by-side comparison, Connect Home in Victorville had 110 units and totaled over $23 million in construction, pricing out to $214,655.07 per unit and taking place over a span of 20 months. While LifeArc in Azusa hosted 25 units and cost just under $2 million in construction, coming out to a total of $78,193.72 per unit, and construction being completed in 5 months. That concludes the shelter tour portion of the presentation. If you have any questions on that, otherwise, I'll hand it to Daniel.
Deputy Mayor, great to see you today. Daniel Sturman, City Management Analyst. On November 14th, 2023, the City Council adopted Resolution 2023-202, amending fiscal year 2022-2023 and fiscal years 23 and 24 budgets, which included an allocation of $4.5 million towards a permanent city-owned interim housing facility. City staff were directed to explore different options for a permanent facility, and on September 19th, 2024, City staff presented options to the Standing Committee on Homelessness to consider. Included with the presentation were considerations on site location, including city-owned land, use of undeveloped land or utilizing adaptive reuse of an existing structure, and modular building construction that could provide durable, affordable, and aesthetically appealing units. In November of 2024, the city was awarded $1 million from California State Senator Catherine Blakespear for the construction of a permanent shelter facility in the city of Vista. Staff was also tasked to work with a real estate broker in finding properties in the Vista Industrial Park and hotels within the city limit for sale. After considering costs associated with an adaptive reuse approach, staff are recommending the city-owned property at 200 Michigan Avenue, currently being utilized by Lifeline Community Services, for further consideration. At the direction of City Council members, staff worked with a real estate broker to locate available industrial park properties and hotels for sale. Above, you will see the results of those search. There were only 3 properties within a 75 to 15,000 square foot layout that were available for sale, and there was 1 hotel that was uncompleted that is also available for sale. Staff began to investigate recent adaptive reuse shelter builds to get an understanding of local costs of construction. Interfaith Community Services Turk Center, a former hotel, was acquired for $8.4 million, underwent $7 million in renovations, including ADA accommodations and major water system upgrades. This 77-room facility with a total of 106 beds opened in November of 2022 after 18 months of work. The Palm Springs Homeless Navigation Center, located at a former industrial site with multiple buildings, was purchased for $5.9 million and saw $7.9 million invested in the shelter portion of that property's renovations. Planning and construction took 16 months and opened in February 2024, providing 50 beds in a congregate living setting. The San Diego Rescue Mission's South County Lighthouse, located in a church they already owned, received $3.5 million in renovations, completing the project in under a year. This shelter was opened in June 2024 and provides 162 beds. Lastly, Oceanside's North County Lighthouse transformed a school building purchased for $1.28 million with $7.6 million in renovations to provide 50 to 100 congregate living beds. Construction began in November of 2021 and took 22 months to complete. This facility opened in August of 2023. After reviewing other proposals for adaptive reuse of established buildings, staff recommends the utilization of a city-owned property at 200 Michigan Ave for partial demolition, reconstruction, and renovation. The site is a 2-acre parcel that is currently the site of operations for Lifeline Community Services. The property currently has 8 structures, and staff is proposing to demolish 3 of the older buildings in yellow to make space for the shelter buildings. 3 of the other buildings in green would be for administrative and case management purposes. 1 building in purple would be utilized for a kitchen and a dining or large meeting space. No concepts have been proposed to utilize the historic building in black. City staff received 3 rough order of magnitudes for modular construction on this property. The construction consists of 48-bed units with 8 showers and 4 laundry and shower setups, or my apologies, laundry and dryer setups in each of the proposals. This does not include any administration space or any other space. This is solely for sheltering.
What are the dimensions of those bedrooms?
These bedrooms have 196 square feet per room, and there's 2 individuals per room.
And that right there is 95 feet by 43 feet.
Affirmative. This proposal would include 2 of these buildings. This is only a diagram of one of the buildings, but they would be identical. This example for mobile modulars would consist of 2 standard stick-built units built off-site, delivered and assembled. This design is meant to be a permanent structure on a permanent foundation. The design you see here consists of 12 189 square foot rooms, 4 restrooms, 2 of which are ADA, and 4 laundry and dryer setups. The total estimated cost for construction, delivery, furniture, washers and dryer, and installation is $3.6 million, averaging out to about $75,000 a bed. Mobile Modular does have the ability to build multi-story units. And the diagram or the depiction on the top left is a depiction of the designed unit they did for us. It matches the historic building in the back corner. The picture you see on the bottom left is a project they did at the Citadel, which is has a very high reputation military college. This proposal from Likevark, a modular construction type that city staff and council viewed in person at Azusa, consists of the same bed, bathroom, and laundry and dryer ratios, is made up of 30% post-consumer recycled plastic, and can be built on a temporary or permanent foundation. These buildings have a lifespan of 30+ years with minimal maintenance, and these buildings are quickly deployed and can be broken down just as fast when they're no longer needed. Their proposal depicted on the right has an estimated cost of $3.8 million, or roughly $79,000 a bed for construction, delivery, installation, furnitures, washers, and dryers. Although these units theoretically can be stacked to create a multi-floor building, Likevark has yet to complete a project with multiple floors. The last rough order of magnitude that we'll be providing is from Shelter Pro Infinite Structures. This proposal from Shelter Pro and Infinite Structures is a modular construction type similar to ones that city staff and council viewed in Victorville. Consists of the same bed, bathroom, and laundry and dryer ratios, is made from steel frame construction and impact-resistant glass, and can be built on a temporary or permanent foundation. These buildings can quickly be erected and dismantled when no longer needed. We only met with this company very recently and were unable to get a detailed estimate. We were given a rough estimate of $5.5 to $8 million, and that can be built as a 1- or 2-story building at that cost. They are shipped flat so as to be able to fit multiple units on a truck and set up on site. The right side is a design they initially came up with for us, but definitely needs some working over. The top is the delivery and setup view, and the bottom is an event they recently set up for a snowboarding event. You can see it's got multiple structures and the roof deck, and looks very aesthetically pleasing. And that is the end of staff's presentation.
All right, thank you.
I'll add quickly too, today's discussion and recommendation is scheduled to be brought to the City Council April 8th.
So I just want to say thank you for all your work on this. You've reviewed properties the city could purchase and rehabilitate. We've seen, yes, there have been some service providers. Interfaith has done that in Escondido. We're looking at our own properties. How can we reconfigure them? What would it cost to build from nothing? I think that, we've made considerations there. And then this innovation with the modular construction, it was really interesting to go see it. I wasn't sure how it was going to feel. There's a big difference between the site in Victorville and the site in Azusa. In Victorville, you might as well have just done conventional construction because it was such a hardy construction. I mean, it was like, lower ceilings and all of that, and, very uniform pieces of construction material, but it was it's such a more intensive construction process. For the one in Azusa, it was, definitely appeared more of a modular product, but still very accessible, right? I have this really, for me, it was a big moment on the tour where I went and met a gentleman who was in one of his rooms, and the room was tiny, right? Just wide enough for a bed. And he was sitting in a wheelchair and just kind of moving around all his creature comforts, right? He was sitting in front of a dresser and moving his tchotchkes around, right? And his little figurines on his desk. And he had his shoes lined up and his clothes there. And I asked him how he liked it, and he said that it's nice and cool inside. So in terms of something that we can provide to get people off of the street, a modular construction may be the most effective way to do it. But we have a couple of options here. Life Arc, I think that they're the ones we visited in Azusa, is that right? And it sounds like Shelter Pro Infinite Structures, that's similar to the more intensive construction that we saw in Victorville. Is that the same company?
Different company, same manufacturing style. Just want to side note, the site at Victorville had utilities close to it where, my apologies, Victorville was, I believe, just desert land.
More remote? Mhm.
Yeah, and so they had to do a lot more infrastructure development, whereas Azusa was closer to utilities at the time.
Okay, but they still like had, just even like the metal construction, I think probably contributes to the cost. But then mobile, what was the last one? I didn't read it.
Mobile modular.
Mobile modular, what's that type of construction? Can you give a little bit more detail on them?
Yeah, it's a standard stick-built structure built off-site, put on trailers and delivered on-site, installed.
Okay, with like you said with like a real foundation.
All of these can be put on either temporary or permanent foundations.
Okay, and what we were seeing in Azusa was a temporary foundation, and what I appreciated about that was, we were able to use our own city resources to connect to infrastructure, so we can get Public Works to do part of that for us. So the funding that we have available and the options for property that we have available, and the time that we have available, it does limit us. So I'm supportive of moving forward with some sort of modular construction. As much as I do believe we can be better utilizing, further utilizing the sites at North County, at Lifeline Community Services, that property in the long term of the city could be used for a whole number of things, right? There's currently services operating out of that building. There is parking available. And after visiting the Life Arc in Azusa, I was surprised by how unassuming these structures were. You like barely notice it from the street. It's just like, it's as low as a fence. It's, settled into the parking lot, and you don't really notice it that much. So I think that there's a lot of things that are attractive about the modular construction. I'm not so sure about the configuration. I think I would want to take a deeper dive into that and how to best utilize the space. But at this time, I wouldn't recommend, removing Lifeline services from those buildings where they're currently operating and rehabilitating them into a shelter. We could get cost estimates on that, but I fear that it would be just not the best use of the space in the long term, where we could have like a larger rehabilitation project, because we do have a short-term time period to address this. We have 2 more years available at our current shelter. And I think the question is, what is permanent, right? So what we have right now is not permanent. We don't own the land, right? We don't own the structure. But what I would say is a more permanent solution is providing shelter in a location where we own the land and we own the structure. So that would be my priority. Mayor, any thoughts from you?
What do we think that, let's go back to the Lifeline site overview right there. Okay, so we own this parcel. What do we think the fair market value of this parcel is? How big is this parcel?
It's about 2 acres.
I'm going to guess you're in the 2.5, 3 million range. That's just a shot in the dark.
Okay. So we'll call it 2.5 million to be conservative. And then you think one of these options, I saw a price tag of 3.6, right? To build?
Probably the Life Arc units, Mr. Sturman?
The Life Arc and the mobile modular are roughly within $5,000. I think it's between $74,000 and $79,000.
Okay, but we thought about 3.6 million to build 48 beds.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Or $6 million, right? 2.5 plus 3.5? Yeah. I mean, we got to consider the, well, I mean, we're deploying an asset that has value. It belongs to the taxpayers, so yeah, we're deploying that asset. You know, comparing it to a comparable. One of the things I'd really like the council to consider is two things in particular. There's never a good place to build a facility like this, but access to transportation is very important. But what I would consider to be of equal importance, in fact, I think it's actually more important, is access to jobs. Because people really, if they're wanting to work to get back on their feet, they need access to a job. And I heard Councilmember O'Donnell say we had 27,000 jobs in the business park. That sounds right to me. That's a lot. 100,000 people in Vista, but we had 27,000 jobs. I know because I've been through so many of those businesses that there are many, many, many unskilled jobs in the business park where if you were willing to show up on time every day, you could have a job if you wanted one. A lot of good jobs that, you know, pay $20, $25 an hour. And all you got to do is just show up on time every day and it's asked of you. People could have walked to those jobs. I don't, you know, and I know we have jobs in the downtown, but we don't have 27,000 jobs. One of the things I just, you know, I want to really go through a cost analysis here, but I saw that Victorville got, how much did you say they looked like? They got about $35 million.
28 million.
28, but go back to that slide because they got 28 million for.
So it was approximately 23 million for construction and then an additional approximate 4 million for operation, but a total of 28 million.
Oh, okay, I was adding the 28 and the 4, but I should be adding the 23 and the 4. So they got $28 million. I mean, for 28 million, see, I think there's a lot of money that is available right now from the state. And just roll with me for 1 second here.
I don't know if I agree with you. This is home key funds. It's like a unicorn.
Well, we could talk about home key. I don't know that that's the only source of funding. We just got 8 million, or what is 7.5 million, 8 million?
7.8.
7.8, 8 million. We just got $8 million from ERF. We've already got 5.5 in the bank for this. We have 4.5 from the council, from the city, 1 million from Blakespeare. We've got 5 million for the last 3 years, which we're 1 year into. Probably I'm just thinking probably we get at least another 5 million from the legislature, right? I mean, that's not implausible. And then maybe through some of these grant programs. So what if, again, just roll with me for a hypothetical adventure into what could be land. What if we bought a 30,000 square foot facility for between $7 and $10 million? And what if we had some offices? You've been to One Safe Place, where they have a lot of facilities for a lot of different kinds of service providers. What if we had enough operating space in there for Lifeline to have an office? What if we had enough space in there for a few different operators to have an office and we could charge them a low fair market value? What if we were then able to economically redevelop the 200 Michigan? What if we were able to economically develop that to create jobs and economic vitality in the downtown, create restaurants and businesses and tax revenues and revitalize the economy, maybe even put some housing on that site? And we went back to our other site and we built our 48 shelter beds in 24 bedrooms. Maybe we even build a couple of more than that. And maybe also we take our 2.5 million that we were just arguing over and we roll that into this project and we create some interim housing, maybe another 50 beds of interim housing, where we have, for people that are really, we go, hey, these are, we could have a program like they have East County Transitional Living Program, or the Rescue Mission has their 12-month Mission Academy. I guarantee you, I think that the Rescue Mission would come up with some money to help build something like this. I don't know if they could do 5 million, but I bet they could. We've already got 5.5. If we get another 5 from the state, if we get another 5 from Rescue Mission, and we've got some benefits from, I think we could get the missing 5 million. Now we have 48 beds to replace the 48 that we're going to lose. Add 48 beds of interim housing that's programmed and right in the job base in our city. And also there's a bus that does run in and out of the business park. Not that that's necessarily where it would be, but that's where there are several buildings available. I'm just throwing it out there. You know, we could have a lot of available space in that structure to serve needs. We might be able to give Operation Hope some additional space somewhere in that building. I don't know about the wisdom of having, you know, that co-located with the other, but, you know, it might be better than a family living in their car on the street somewhere. But it would give us a lot of potential expansion capacity and give us a permanent base of operations. And if we looked at it holistically, it could give us the opportunity to economically redevelop that space downtown. I just think this is a big decision. You know, we're making a 30-year decision. And I just, you know, I wonder if, would it be more beneficial to live downtown for somebody recovering from chronic homelessness, or to live next to 27,000 jobs, and without all the temptation of all the things that are downtown, you know, drinking establishments and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm having a big idea, and I don't think I have much buy-in from anybody yet for my big idea at this point, but I'm just asking you to think out loud with me for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm concerned about our cost to purchase. You know, we have to come up with $7 million to purchase within the business park. So that to me is a huge limitation. And then I will say off the bat, I wouldn't be favorable to moving Lifeline to the business park. I think, you know, it's a central location for them. They have their, you know, youth drop-in center over there. If we were to revitalize that property, I'm committed to including them in that. And then, you know, jobs, I think that you make a good point about jobs. I'm wondering, like, if we don't purchase a building in the business park to conduct a shelter, could we purchase land via parking lots available space, right? Is there some sort of deal that we can make to take some available parking and do modular construction in the business park? I'm not opposed to any particular location for the shelter. I do want it to be connected to resources. I think that the Sprinter line does have the potential to connect people to more jobs in the bus system of the Vista Transit Center. You know, so I don't have a count on how many jobs would be accessible to someone at the 200 Michigan site versus in the business park. I think, you know, I could see a shelter being appropriate in either location. And I always say, build it in District 3, right? Come to my neighborhoods, build it in my neighborhoods, because I know, and we've seen it time and time again, when you offer programming, it cleans up the neighborhood. It makes it nice. It makes it comfortable. It gives security. People know that there's good stuff going on, right? And there's more good things than bad things. So you know, I just, where are we going to find $7 million for a building? We have funding available, and, you know, we could piece it together with something else, but we could also use the funding available to construct something that's a modular fit.
Well, I think, now I took 196 and I multiplied that times 48. But are we getting kitchen and bathroom facilities also, I assume?
Most of these ROMs, yeah, we did have bathrooms included in kitchens as well, I believe.
The kitchens, so the purple building you see there already has a kitchen in it. Probably would need a little bit of updating to get up to code, but there's already a full kitchen and a dining room meeting space in there.
So here's the thing is that I'm doing a rough back of the envelope math here. At $6 million, you're at $734 a square foot. At what it would, if we put $15 million into a larger property, that's $454 a square foot. It's actually cheaper. It gives us more opportunity to build out more later. We don't have to build the whole thing out right away. We could build out just a small part of it, and then we could come back and say, okay, now we want to add, and of course, we don't, the drop-in facility for North County Lifeline, that's in a house, that's not even on this parcel. So they wouldn't have to move that. I don't know how many clients drop into this facility for them. I don't know. Is that a retail in and out location, or is that just administrative offices?
Both. They also operate, they have 10 units for Tay in the adjacent North Santa Fe apartments.
But they're not on this parcel.
Correct. No, it's across the street from this parcel.
I'm just wondering whether their offices need to be co-located.
Yeah, I will just make it clear that people are receiving services there.
I can also add too, with the
in
modular
for
units,
client
we can also construct additional offices on the same lot with the
So
same units.
This low, and have we had any conversations with Lifeline?
Yeah, we have.
Okay, and what are their thoughts on modular construction and use of the kitchen and all these different adaptations that we're considering?
The discussion didn't get that far. We just let them know whether we'd be considering this property for other uses.
Yeah,
But
I'm
of
sure
course,
they've been aware of that.
yes, and one goal that they have is they'd like to consolidate their staff throughout North County back to a centralized location in Vista. So they do have intention to move back in a larger capacity at this site. So one thing we could consider is we utilize this lot, including the parking lot and existing buildings, build our shelter units and additional office space as well, so they can continue to operate from there.
So I wouldn't be favorable to just build additional office space. If we're doing any construction outside of modular construction on this site, we're rebuilding, we're taking up more floor space. I think some of these facilities are even trailers. I'm pretty sure some of them are office trailers.
They are,
for,
correct. They're
Mayor
all
mentioned admin, so, and then one is a historic building. When I visited the ARC project, the Life Arc, I was not pleased to see that kitchen wouldn't be suitable, right? And that you couldn't cook in the facilities versus the site in Victorville, right? The construction was to a code standard that would allow for a full kitchen. And I think that nutrition is a really important part of these programs for me. So I like this site because it does have access to a kitchen, even if the modular construction doesn't allow for that type of food preparation. So if we were to change the buildings, right, and actually do construction on this site that's not modular construction, I wouldn't want to just add, it would be a whole reconstruction of this parcel. What I'm willing to entertain is using, a smaller source of funding to have a couple decades worth of programming possible within a modular construction. Now, I know that there was concerns about the lifespan of these products. Do we have any more details on the appraisal of them and really what their lifespan is?
The plastic units with Life Arc, they say 30+ years. Both the stick build and the steel frame modular are meant to be a lifetime.
Okay. I don't know if we need to build something new. And if we're going to build something new on this site, then we're getting rid of the trailers. We're reconstructing this whole space, right? Maybe we're retaining the historic building in some way. And maybe there's parking sites in the business park, right? Have we looked at all available parking?
We did not look for available parking spaces in the business park.
Okay.
We'd have to buy the land, though, and versus a long-term lease, we wouldn't really be able to long-term lease. We'd be in the same position that we're in now.
Right, we're in this, and that's where, Mayor, I appreciate your invention and wanting to kind of bring more stakeholders together for a long-term effect, you know? But $7 million for the site that is available in the business park, I'm just not sure, like, if we could direct staff to do that, but we have less than 2 years to respond to the need of the people in the shelter right now. And, we missed you during the tour, and, I was very critical of the different components, like I said, one didn't have a kitchen. If we're gonna get people off the streets, right, this is the quality of, it's emergency housing. The thing I really liked about the concept of Life Arc and the idea that they can float away, speaking to the creator of it, is that it was designed as an emergency housing in flood zones, right? And it was designed to respond to natural disasters. And homelessness is a crisis. So I don't want to be too pie in the sky because the cost of property is so big. We have some property here. If we can provide a product for people to stay in that's dignified, I think that would be the best that we can do.
So our annual rent where we're at now is $528,000. We pay $44,000 a month. I am quite certain that our current landlord would extend our stay by 12 months. And we're in a pretty decent bargaining situation. I bet he wouldn't even raise our rent. So for $528,000, we can extend our stay where we're at. If we had to, for $1 million, extend it for 2 more years. I would ask you, please do not be in any kind of a panic or rush
Definitely not in a
to
panic.
replace what we have now. I don't want to stay where we're at, only because if he would sell it to us, I would stay there. But I don't want to lease it forever. I'd like to own it. But I'm not sold that this is the cheapest long-term option. I think the actual long-term math is it costs more. It looks like it's actually a greater upfront cost per square foot.
Why don't you share those numbers with me?
Well, if you take the square footage that we're constructing and you divide it by the cost, like I say, I'm coming up with,
And you're comparing, to be clear, 48 units of modular construction to what exactly?
well, I'm saying if we can buy a property in the business park for $7 or $8 million, and then we could put 6 or 7 million into it to build out just our 48 beds, probably be less than that. The money does seem to be available right now through the state. So if
Essentially.
just for the sake of conversation alone, I think let's assume that we could pay for this with money that we get from the state and some private money to come from either the rescue mission or some other organization. I really believe the money is available and not out of our own coffers. But that is a separate, that's a what if. But the proposition that's been made is that we're over a barrel to do something in a short time period. And that's just a false
Well, I'll
imperative.
just say, that's not the only reason why I appreciate the modular construction. I think it's appropriate for the population that we're serving. And we're putting a lot of investment towards permanent housing elsewhere. I feel a little unsure about building a permanent shelter structure or even taking a property that, we could buy for permanent supportive housing and turning it into a shelter. So I think that this type of construction, after meeting that gentleman, saying it was so great for it to be cool in his room, I was like, this is for getting people off the streets. This is for an emergency application. This is an emergency shelter construction. This, is not a resort, right? These are bungalows that people can survive in. So I don't really feel the pressure, but what you're suggesting is that we do extend our stay at our current shelter.
If we have
which
to.
does dwindle down, right, our funding that's available. And with the cost of acquiring property, the cost of constructing it, right, and rehabilitating it in some way, I'm just not convinced that it's just going to be $6 or $7 million more dollars. I think it's going to be a lot more than what we have available. And the estimates that staff, you've been giving us, can you go back to the prior slides on some of the, yeah, so we have, some similar ideas here that were implemented. We have San Diego Rescue Mission. Their building was already owned, $3.5 million in renovations, 162 beds. But that's congregate living, right? Something about our shelter structure that's really important. Why I like the module, not just because of the quick turnaround, but because it allows for the privacy and dignity of the individual. And
I would just note that's 3.5 million for 162 beds, and we're talking about 48.
I don't like a congregate living.
No, I understand that, and it would be more expensive to build a non-congregate or we call it ours a semi-congregate because
Right.
it's 2 to a room.
And
All I'm saying is we haven't really examined any other option other than we latched on to the modular, and all I'm asking is, could we look at the other option?
we could, but I think that the modular is very attractive. I don't think,
Okay,
I think
maybe it wins, but.
and we
but
could
don't-
look at all of them. As a committee member, you could make that recommendation.
Well, I'm saying, what
But
if,
what would you like to direct staff to do in that regard? What do we need to do next in order to pursue that? We've looked at the cost of properties that are available. Unless since you've reviewed that with the broker, there's more properties available.
This is a very recent list of the business park properties.
Okay, so we have, and I like the business park.
did you have a list of business park properties in this slides? Go back to that.
It was just the one, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But what about these other sites? So,
And I'm seeing these square footages, but I'm looking on LoopNet right now, and I'm seeing several more buildings available that are much larger. You've got small buildings here, but I'm thinking about buildings big enough that we could come back and add a transitional living program in, that we could add a job training program in, that we could add it's a modular facility where all of the services that we would need to serve this population might be able to be housed under one roof because we start out with 30,000 square feet. And, we put 10,000 of it at first into the 48 beds. I'm thinking about Urban Street Angels, their facility downtown. Did you go through that?
I haven't seen that one.
They have a nice dormitory-style facility downtown. It looks very much like a college dorm. It was very suitable. I don't understand why the modular facility, my analysis of it, and I'd like to see the side-by-side analysis. My analysis is that long-term it's more expensive, partly because it's a depreciating asset instead of an appreciating asset. A stick-built building increases in value, although it does have maintenance. I assume these have some maintenance, although they may be more maintenance-free because they're expected to be discarded and replaced. But like an automobile, these things lose value over time until they're worthless. A building with land appreciates in value and is expected to have an infinite life if maintained. And probably, you and I are going to be here in 30 years. And one of the things that weighs heavily on my mind, and I hope you would consider this, is somebody thought modular classrooms was just a fantastic idea. And nobody in the community today thinks it's a good idea because they're dilapidated and, the parents don't like them, teachers and students don't like them. And they're not attractive and they just don't feel permanent. And again, I'm looking at, are they genuinely the lowest cost option? I'm not sure we've really done the side-by-side comparison with a traditional stick-built building to see what is the, and I kind of do think that government should consider, we built this building and we're already talking about all the maintenance that we need to do when this building's fully paid off, when Measure L is paid for. We're gonna, time passes quickly in government, think. We should be making a 40-year plan because the city isn't going anywhere. And we're gonna have these needs 40 years from now.
Mayor, and here's where I disagree, is that I don't want to be investing in a kind of what you're describing as this like center for homeless services for such a, we're talking about strategic planning, right? Long term. I think that we should, the reason why I like the modular and the reason why I'm okay with the shorter lifespan is because in our strategic plan to address homelessness, we are resolving homelessness permanently for people. maybe that's wishful thinking that homelessness will go away in 30 years, but I hope that our programming and our services are adequate to the point where we've prevented homelessness, we have housing stability in our region, and we're not in the need for a homelessness supercenter. But in addition to, that recommendation that we have all of these homeless services in one location, I actually believe that the 200 Michigan site would be a better location for that, because what you're kind of describing is a community center. And I would like to see the 200 Michigan site adapted into a community center in the future that could foster economic development, that could give people opportunities, that could have both housing and potentially retail, right? There's so many different options for that site. I think that the business park is a little bit far removed for something that large, but I actually don't want to be building something really, really big, right? I want to be addressing the homelessness problem as the crisis that it is, and then continuing to invest in those permanent solutions. So I think that's just where I'm coming from.
To be clear, I am not suggesting a community center because to me that sounds like a retail operation, and that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting something that could be a place with basically very short-term residential housing, and which is our NAV center, which is 30 to 120 days, and then perhaps we could have some interim housing, which would be up to 12 months in the future.
So for the benefit of providing feedback from the committee, I would like to look at additional parking that could be available, right? Even for purchase for modular construction. I'm not beholden to this initial site of 200 Michigan. If there are other sites that could be available, why don't we just look at it? And then, Mayor, your recommendations, if there's other property available, if there's an appeal that we can make to higher levels of governance, what can we do to get closer to this idea of, I actually think that we do need dormitory housing and these different things. And does it need to be provided all within one site? Probably not. If we had the space and opportunity to do that, it could be amazing, right? But you're seeing on your research that there's other properties available. Staff, where can we go from here, right? Is there more research that you can do? What was the parameters for your research here?
So for the modular units, we were looking for about 2 acres, similar to the parcel for Lifeline. We've looked at some other private properties for sale. Sale price does tend to be the prohibiting factor. So the fact that the city already owns a Lifeline lot is a pretty substantial cost saving.
But when you were looking at, with the broker of properties available, were you limiting the square footage in any way, or were you just looking at anything?
I think we did give a range.
75 to 15,000 square feet.
And why was that?
That was the direction given to us.
Yeah, that was just assuming a building size that would accommodate
Current
the
operations.
number
at
of
our
units
shelter.
that we were looking for,
Right,
right?
comparable to our current facility.
Okay.
The construction of this unit we got quoted is about 6,000 square feet to house 48 beds, showers, laundry, washer, and dryer.
My recommendation is that this is a big investment. It's an important investment, and we're being backed against the wall with a false time urgency, because in fact we can buy another year at a time for another 528,000. We've spent 16 million. We just took in another 7.8 million. The $528,000 is not the issue. We have time, and I think that if we need another 12 months to make a decision and get something done to pursue funding, I know there are some pitfalls with the Home Key program. Is that only for the conversion of motels?
The former original Home Key, yes. Now Home Key Plus is the only program available. That's only for PSH.
Okay.
You cannot convert for interim housing anymore, yeah.
These people need permanent supportive housing. So can we provide PSH for 12 months and call it interim? Or it has to be permanent?
It would have to be permanent with the client on the lease, long-term lease.
Well, maybe that's not the right program, but we have all this Prop 1 money, and, I mean, there's a lot of money available right now, and it's not just encampment resolution money.
For example, Prop 1 is also for permanent housing. Most of it is.
If
trade
Victorville
enforcement
can
housing.
get, $30 million, I'm pretty sure we could figure out how to get some more money. I just think I think we shouldn't be limited by where the money's going to come from, because I think there's a lot of money out there, and particularly for this subject, and if we're proposing something that's the right thing on this subject. And so, look, I'm particularly not proposing something that would be something the community would, militate against, but we're already sort of down in that neighborhood now. We're not in the exact same neighborhood, but if we could be right in the job center where people could have jobs, and if we could do some transitional housing on the same site, I really believe that we could make the funding work. All I'm asking is, would you have any inclination not to go with me on it, but to say, well, you know what, I'm not sold on the idea, but maybe it would be reasonable to ask staff to take a little look at it? And
I don't know.
No,
I
okay.
don't know, Mayor. I actually think that the long-term goal is not to have the similar site development that you're talking about. I'm not favorable to investing such long-term solutions into homelessness when this is a crisis situation. And I'm not saying it's a crisis situation as in we only have 2 years left on our lease. I'm hesitant to invest so many dollars into constructing something for homelessness.
let me be really clear. If you were willing to join me right now in writing a letter to the governor and the sheriff and say every homeless person should have two choices. They can either go voluntarily with us to get help, or they can go involuntarily to conservatorship or to jail. Voluntary or involuntary, but you're not staying here. Until you get to that conclusion, this problem will exist forever with us. And I don't think that you're with me on that. I don't know that you are or you aren't, but I don't think you're with me on that. We could solve this problem in about 6 months. Maybe it'd take a year, might take 18 months, but I think we get it done in 18 months if we walked up to every person on the street, like Justin that we met in front of Starbucks, where Starbucks went out of business because of all the transients camping in front of it. We no longer have a Starbucks there. And we walked up to him, and he's been on the streets for a year and a half, and he's just a marijuana addict. He says he doesn't do anything other than that. But we were there with the rescue mission, and I was having a nice conversation with him. Doesn't want our help. Doesn't want it. He's happy smoking marijuana. We're bringing him food. We're bringing him bus passes. We're bringing him this, that, or the other. He built a tent at South Buena Vista Park. He's got a tent set up. He bragged that he's hidden it from us. If you were willing to say to Justin, I'm really sorry, Justin, but that's not okay. You're going to have to come to the shelter. And if you won't say yes to come to the shelter and work the program, then you're going to go to jail or you're going to go to conservatorship. If you were willing to join me in that, homelessness is done. Off the table, move on to the next problem of government. But I don't think right now I have a majority of policymakers or even of voters necessarily that have yet understood the problem as well as I've tried to know that that's the righteous solution, that we could get everyone off the streets if we no longer left them the option to make an unhealthy, mentally, literally, clinically, mentally diseased option to stay on the street.
You're right. We don't have a policy that compels people to get
We should.
shelter.
We should.
And I don't necessarily want to build a shelter when there's affordable modular options available, which we say won't last, but I've lived in modular housing before that was supposedly not going to last and was, built in the 60s, and it was student housing. And I, lived there and it was fine, right? So, I think that we can look at the cost differences, but, you're doing some quick math for us, and I'm not super confident it's going to pencil out in the way that you're describing.
What's super frustrating is that you're saying you're not even willing to look at it.
We can look at it, but when this comes before the whole council, I'm prepared to support modular construction.
All I'm asking for is, quote, we can look at it. That's all I'm looking at.
But no,
That's all I'm
I
asking for.
couldn't give any further recommendations at this time. I need to hear from staff what will you have prepared for us on April 8th?
Perhaps I should ask a clarifying question. When the vice chair suggests that we look further into, are you to consider additional funding sources or construction costs?
Funding sources, ballpark construction costs, estimates, based on if we were to, I'll visit with you and we'll have to come up with some more here, but I'm just saying,
If staff can provide more information for April 8th, that's great.
I'm just
Yeah, I
saying,
think we have a pretty good reference with these projects here.
I'm just saying I don't think we need to be in a rush to do this
Could you-
because we do have the option to extend where we're at.
Yes, and I don't want to do that.
I don't want to either. I'd love to have a permanent
I
solution.
want to own the land and own the structure that we're providing these services. And I think we can accomplish that with these attractive modular, and it's an innovative technology, right? And that has been produced out of the innovation of crisis, right? And flood zones in the Amazon. So, I mean, it's an innovative solution. Not every city is doing it, but not every city is taking on the burden of building a large center for all the different services that you're describing. So I wouldn't necessarily direct staff to do that. I wouldn't direct staff to, create our own construction for all these services that you're describing. But is there something else that staff can provide? I think that the information that's here is not easily referenced. Like, I can't really see a comparison here. So it's going to be for the benefit of our whole council to have the information
Understand.
a little bit clearer.
No, I appreciate that. Madam Chair, I don't have any other input on this, our last item, and I don't have anything for our general discussion. And I have another meeting since we've run a little over our
think
time.
We will go ahead and at your need adjourn.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Thank you, you too.